my camera back up again. Okay. Okay. Still good? Still good? Somebody type something in chat. We'll see if the chat box is working. Okay, it's not working. Cool, 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 cool. I love that for us. Oh. Yeah. Peaches and cream. Chat box. Add. Add. Say stuff again. It smells very peachy. Here, I'll type stuff too. Blah 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 blah. Okay, cool. I love that for us. Chat box. Boo. There we go. Nice. Bring out the rice. All right. Hello. Welcome back. Happy New Year. I hope you guys had a good New Year. Oh, should we do TikTok? I don't know. We can try for a little bit TikTok, but I feel like we tend to we don't really get as much activity, but you know, whatever. Oh, this is the do not disturb so I don't get fucking called. Okay. Happy New Year. All right. So, recap. Oh god, do I remember the recap? So, I'm not going to recap the first book. Just this book. Molly and Rocky. Okay, no. Molly was sent on a mission by Lucy Logan, who is the one who introduced her to hypnosis by hypnotizing her to take the book in the first one. She goes to Lucy Logan. Lucy Logan is like all in a cast and stuff because she had an accident with a burning car, and she's like, I think this guy Primo Cell is hypnotizing celebrities and is maybe going to run for president and is gonna get all this power, whatnot. And clearly you're the only one, a child, who can stop him. So Molly and Rocky go to Los Angeles. They infiltrate the Oscars, the Academy Awards. They find out that Primo Cell's hypnosis is somehow permanent. They are not able to undo any of the hypno on the celebrities that he's hypnotized. So they're like, fuck, we don't know what to do. They run into Primo Cell, who invites them to his house where he's having, you know, a party with said celebrities. At the house, they are trying to find something. They're trying to get something on him that might help understand why it is that his hypno is permanent in these celebrities' minds. They find a secret room where there's a bunch of the same copies of the hypno book that is what introduced them to hypno in the first place, because he's gotten rid of a bunch of, I guess, competing hypnotists. Then they, like, leave, but they then come back later, and they find out that the reason they are there physically to witness it, they're, like, hiding behind a curtain. They see Primo Cell hypnotizing a, like, general of the army. And what makes it permanent is he stops time. That's an element. When Molly, like, is basically trying to hypnotize an inanimate object, she gets a cold fusion feeling, and her diamond gets all cold, and time stops. Primo Cell stops time mid-trance, and that's what, like, makes it lock in. So they're there behind the curtain, witnessing it. Primo Cell senses that she's there, you know, while time is still stopped. He finds Molly and Rocky, and he's like, you're not supposed to be here. I had a suspect that you were a powerful hypnotist, and here you are. Now I have to get rid of you. So he calls up his son. I don't remember his fucking name. We'll find out soon. They take them down with the hypnotized general, and they put them in this, essentially a torture room, with a giant fucking bird. Giant metallic bird that when it swings around, it's going to, you know, and there's, like, a drain for the mess and stuff. Molly realizes that the diamond is what allows her to stop time. It's like, it's special. And so Primo Cell, time is still stopped, puts the diamond back on her, and he's like, I'm gonna let go of time, and, you know, you're able to, they're, like, locked into the chair, both her and Rocky. He's like, good luck, and then leaves. And the last thing that Molly remembers is the bird is, like, real fucking close. She's held time stopped for as long as she can, and she blacks out because it's too much. That's where we are. Let's see what's gonna happen. Oh, I may be spoiled a little bit, but it's okay. Molly and Rocky sat rigidly on the death bench with the iron vices around their ankles and their bodies held firmly by the cruel steel straps. Rocky could feel his chest tightening. Molly reached forward to see if she could lean below the point where the magpie's beak would sweep by. It's useless. I can't get out of the firing line. She stared at the hideous instrument of death with terror in her eyes. Rocky, I don't want my backbone sliced off. But if we sit up, we'll be mashed head on by the bird. The beak will hit me, said Rocky, his voice wheezing asthmatically. I saw where it comes. It'll skewer me. Then the side of its wings will rip us. And when it returns, its tail will slice our heads clean off. Desperately, he began to claw at the metal belt. Oh, Rocky, oh, please, someone help! Molly yelled at the top of her voice, struggling uselessly. This can't be happening. He's just trying to scare us. He'll be back. I'm sure he will. He couldn't want to murder us? Oh, I don't believe it, Rocky, gasped Molly. He's gonna murder us. Molly screamed louder than she had ever screamed in her life. Help! Help! Somebody! Help us! Rocky took Molly's hand. The 2 minutes are almost up. Molly stopped. Despite her panic, she noticed how still and calm he was. No one can hear us, can they? Rocky shook his head. He had tears in his eyes. Sorry, Molly. But there must be something we can do, pleaded Molly. We must be able to break these things. All her hypnotic powers felt useless. This can't be it. All of a sudden, the magpie gave a deafening screech. Molly almost fainted with fear. You can stop the world now, said Rocky, and give us just a bit more time. Yes, Molly panted. Of course, yes. Molly stared at the drain beside them and pulled her mind into sharp focus. She had only a few seconds. From a part of her mind, a small voice carried, What's the point, Molly? It'll hit you eventually. Molly ignored it. At lightning speed, she achieved the cold fusion feeling, and as it flooded her body, she heard the bird's charging swoop. She saw it coming. With massive effort, she sucked the cold sensation to its summit. In a split second, the bird was upon them, and yet it wasn't quite there. Just in time, the world had stopped. Tremulously, Molly looked up. The magpie's beak was only a few inches from Rocky's neck. His eyes were tight shut. The spread of one wing was a few feet away from Molly's chest. Molly put her hand on Rocky's shoulder, and just as she had seen Primo Cell resuscitate the general, she sent the fusion feeling down her arm and into him. Rocky opened his eyes, instinctively straining away from the pickaxe beak. It's frozen, said Molly. How long for? He wheezed. It's going to rip me open. And how come I'm moving? Molly held the fusion feeling inside her more determinedly than she'd ever held on to anything in her life before. As long as you're touching me, you're not frozen, she told him, and the magpie is still for as long as I hold it there. Molly could feel, somewhere in the house above them, Sinclair was Primo Cell's son's name, and Primo Cell's resistance to her freeze. She thought of Cell's irritation at not being able to continue showing off to a guest at his lunch party. He'd have to leave a sentence unfinished and remember exactly what he was saying when time started again. When the world moved once again, if it did, Molly and Rocky would be dead. Molly stared at the black and white killing machine in front of her. Did the world have to start again? Of course it did. Rocky touched the tip of the magpie's beak. How many people has this magpie tortured before us? The bird's metal eyes stared blankly at them. What shall we do? Said Molly. I mean, if these are, our last moments alive. She felt like crying. I suppose we should be enjoying it, said Rocky. If we're gonna die, we might as well. I mean, when it happens, Molly, it'll happen so fast I don't think we'll feel it. We'll die instantly. So we might as well try and be happy now. What, you mean tell each other jokes? Molly said, a hard lump in her throat sending a pain up the back of her neck. Or should we be remembering, good times? She took several deep breaths. It was taking huge concentration to both talk and hold the world still. Hello! I'm doing good. There's no shoulds about it, said Rocky. Then he said, Cell didn't even give us a last request, like in the movies. And this is Hollywood. Talk about mean. Molly looked at her friend. Rocky looked genuinely annoyed. He'd almost made her smile. What would you have asked for? My guitar. Then I might have been able to use my voice and hypnotize him with a song. What about you? A gun. Molly felt the stopped world like a powerful jack-in-the-box ready to spring, trying to force her to let it move again. She pushed it into submission. It made her feel cold. So cold. Molly groaned. All right? Asked Rocky. I'm getting a bit tired. I'm glad you were delivered to the orphanage all those years ago, Rocky suddenly said. Same here with you. Molly knew this conversation was going to hurt worse than anything she'd ever felt before. Rocky, all my life I've wanted to know who my parents were. Now I'm glad I don't. I'm glad I'm an orphan, because if I wasn't, I wouldn't know you, Rocky. You've been the best friend anyone could ever have. And you're the best singer. Your songs are brilliant. The world would have loved them if... Rocky, what do you think death is like? I think it feels like sleep, but without the dreams. A deep sleep where you don't think or feel anything. Do you think we'll ever wake up again? I don't think we will, no. I think our spirits called Molly and Rocky, will be in a big sleep forever and we won't even know it. But maybe the energy that comes out of us when we die, the energy that has no feelings or thoughts, that will go into something else, like a battery. The energy that was the power behind our lives will wait until something else plugs into it. What would you like your energy battery to be used for next, Molly? Molly thought for a second. Petula's puppies, if she ever has them. Rocky stroked Molly's hand. You mustn't be scared of dying, Molly. But how do you know all this? It's just what I believe, said Rocky. It's common sense. I was never a big one for religion. Religions have great music, that's for sure, and cool buildings, but religions seem to make people fight each other too much. If you treat people and animals around you as well as you can, that's enough religion, don't you think? Do you think we've treated people and animals well enough? Asked Molly. Hard line for a death. What does death feel like? I know. They got really deep. We're not perfect, but you're lovely, Molly. So are you. But if everything dies and goes to a place like sleep, what is the point of life? That's like asking what's the point of a beautiful sunrise or a fantastic piece of music. Okay, so what's the point in those things? Why does there have to be a point? Asked Rocky. Maybe there is a point behind it all, said Molly. Maybe we're going to find out what that point is. Molly was shivering uncontrollably. She felt her strength slip as the world pushed her to let it move again. The pressure of all the trillions of people and animal and insects and plants and machines in the world that were trying to burst out, to continue, to move on. Molly imagined the stillness all over the world. People in the middle of a joke, laughing but with no noise coming out of their mouths. People fighting, their punching fists frozen in the air. There were always wars in the world. There must be bullets that had just been arrested mid-air, bombs that had just been detonated. The violent things were too horrible to think about. Molly thought of the good things. A child taking her first steps. A person in a hospital emerging from a coma. Maybe somewhere a person was about to write the number that would win the lottery. Babies were being born. People were winning races. Inventors and artists were, right now, having ideas. Scientists could, at this moment, be discovering something really important, and all these people wanted to continue moving. Molly gritted her teeth. With every passing minute, the pressure was becoming more difficult to bear. She knew she couldn't talk anymore. 8 minutes had passed. She stared with hatred at the metal bird in front of her, despising it, wishing it would just disappear. She felt sick and more lightheaded. Molly held the world still for another 4 minutes. Then another 4. She held on so tight that she thought she might shatter. She was holding on to a cliff edge, dangling over a precipice, looking down into a chasm that was death. Rocky seemed to be clinging to her legs, and now only the tips of her fingers held on. Her nails grated over the surface of the rock, trying to find a grip, but slipping. I can't hold on, she murmured. I feel so cold. Then she shut her eyes and felt gravity pull her down into the chasm as time swallowed her. That evening, Sel had dinner with all his resident stars. He always found their company amusing, and it did him good to remind himself how powerful he was. They sat around his grand dining room table, behind elaborate place settings of cut glass and solid gold cutlery, and he listened to how their day had gone. Gloria Heelheart was thrilled because Gino Pucci, the director of the film she'd been shooting all year, had just found a replacement for the dog role in it. You know, Primo, I told you how the first dog had a heart attack. We didn't know how we were going to find another one that would be as charming. I couldn't let one of my little peakies take the role, as the other 9 would get jealous. And now Gino has found a simply fabulous dog to play the role, a pug. So we're going to reshoot all the dog scenes next week, so the movie should be ready by early November. Primo stuck his teaspoon into a raw sea urchin in front of him. He scooped up its salty center and put it into his mouth. That's good, he nodded. Hercules Stone looked at his plate and frowned. I can't eat this, he snarled. His personal butler appeared magically at his side. I thought we told the chef how I like my burgers. The cheese goes on top of the meat, and the pickles go between the tomato and the lettuce, not on top of the lettuce. The mustard goes under the meat, not on top, and the mayo should be between the pickle and the tomato. I'm sorry, sir, said the butler. It's just very difficult for the chef to remember, as the order of the pilot changes all the time. I can't eat this, insisted Hercules Stone, and like a spoiled child, he turned his plate upside down. Oh, gross, said Suki Champagne from the other side of the table. I can't digest my salad now. Cosmo Ace was more sympathetic. Don't worry, Herc. But King Moose, who was sitting next to Suki, moved the 8-pronged candelabrum aside so that he could look Hercules Stone in the eye. I'm telling you, Stone, he growled, any more behavior like that and I'll give you a knuckle sandwich for your dinner, and it won't have no mayo or pickles or mustard on it. It'll come as it comes, and it'll knock all those nice teeth out of yours out. So from now on, you'll be eating soup. Just you try, Moose. I'll sue, said Hercules, flexing his biceps. If we're talking food, Moose, said Tony Wham, the karate star, how would you like to taste one of my Kung-fu chops? Primo, please stop them. I hate when they argue, whined Suki. Enough, said Primo Cell, and all at once the stars in the room hung their heads obediently. Sinclair Cell arrived and apologized for being late. Another fight? He asked. It wasn't too bad tonight, said Cell. After dinner, everyone retired downstairs to the movie theater. The big cinema screen had been dismantled, and in the space behind it was a curtained stage. On it, a man in white tie and tails sat at a grand piano. They all sat down, knowing exactly what entertainment to expect. It was one show about which they never spoke. Cell settled in his armchair. That was his favorite part of the day. He clapped his hands, and the lights dimmed to 2 white spotlights that shone on the pianist, who launched into the tune of Cell's favorite song. And then the star came on. Davina Natel stepped out of the wings. Davina Natel was the child star who was kidnapped at the very beginning of this book. She looked thinner and more tired than the Davina of the magazine photo shoots. A guard stood beside her, still as a tin soldier. She glared out into the dark auditorium. I won't sing, she said defiantly. Cell looked at her and exhaled thoughtfully. He wondered for the 100th time what it was about Davina that challenged his hypnotic power. When he had tried to hypnotize her, she had twisted away from his magnetism like a lizard avoiding a net. But although this perplexed Cell, he didn't let it worry him, because there was a part of Davina that filled him with awe. He'd found that her singing made him feel better than anything else could. Why? He didn't know. Her voice had become a calming drug to him, and now he couldn't do without it. Oh dear, Davina, Cell's silky voice replied. Do you think you can really put up with another day of raw sea urchins for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? You know how much you hate them. Think of what else could be on the menu. You've got a wonderful new chef who makes the most delicious chocolate cake and homemade butterscotch donuts. For a moment, Davina's lower lip quivered. Then she stamped her foot. I'm not a caged nightingale, Cell. I won't just sing when you feel like it. People pay me to sing, and I won't do it for free. And I especially won't do it for you. I hate you. Now, Davina, one song is all I ask. Then you can live like a princess again. You can have a lovely bath in all those exotic oils. You can wash your hair. Davina stared out into the dark auditorium, her eyes gray and ringed. She shook her head angrily, but she knew she had been beaten. Oh yeah, no, you've missed a lot. Did you also miss the whole first book? You should definitely go back and watch so that you know what's I told you it gets crazy. It's only gonna get crazier. We continue. All right, I'll sing. With that, the piano played the refrain. Cell leaned back. The song that Davina was about to sing was the only thing that ever made him feel any emotion. Perhaps, he thought, his mother had sung it to him as a baby. He wasn't sure why it produced tender feelings in him, but it did. Feelings of regret and longing. And when it was sung by this child, for some reason it became 10 times more powerful. Davina wasn't a pleasant girl, but that didn't matter. She reminded Cell of something he had lost. His childhood, perhaps. Davina's pure voice cut through the air like a fresh spring breeze. Sitting on an island in the ocean may seem kind of free. Lying on a beach of golden sand, may sound as life should be. Sounds like heaven, but it ain't heaven. No siree. A billion waves of sea, you see, divide you from me. Only you can make my world heavenly. Cell sighed, and Davina sang on in heavenly white light. What happens when you die, and how do we feel about religion? Keep in mind, the two kids, they're like 12. They're 12. So, like, nuts. Yeah, I'm live on Twitch and YouTube right now. The light was white as the light of heaven. Molly opened her eyes, and as she looked around, she shook with shock. She was in a completely different place from where she'd been seconds before, and she instantly knew. She felt thoroughly different. Molly didn't feel exhausted, frozen, desperate, and terrified to die. She felt rested, warm, and calm, as if she'd left the stresses and strains of life far behind. She felt as if she was in paradise. She was no longer trapped on the steel bench with the killer magpie a foot away from her. Instead, she sat on an old chair in a dry wooden hut through which blew a soft breeze, warmed by the sun. She could see a peeling, white-painted bench outside. Beyond that, a jetty and a blue of the ocean. The blue of the ocean. Rocky sat on a chair beside her, looking out to sea too. For a moment, they both sat motionless, listening to the distant slap of small waves and the cries of gulls. "Rocky," Molly said, "we're dead. We're in heaven." She looked at the white room. There were 2 beds, each with sheets, a blanket, and a pillow. To her right was a small kitchen, and to the left a doorway to a tiny bathroom. A guitar hung on the wall. "I don't remember the bird hitting us," said Rocky. "Wouldn't we remember that split second as it hit us? A second of pain? Maybe we died before the message of pain got to our brains." Molly stared at 2 chairs by the opposite wall. Some clothes lay on them. Faded, ragged clothes. Underneath one chair sat her sneakers. They were different. They were worn out. And her t-shirt had a rip in it. Molly stood up and, feeling very unreal, as if she was walking on air, went and picked up her jeans. They had been cut short to knee length and were frayed. Was heaven a place where you kept the clothes that you died in? You might fall asleep. That's totally okay. "Crikey, Molly, you're so brown," said Rocky. "Look at the color of your legs." Molly looked. Instead of being spammy, her legs were golden. Rocky contemplated his, too. "I've never been this dark before." "We must have been dead." Molly found it difficult to say the word. "For quite a while." She picked up Rocky's shirt. There were no signs of death, of blood on it. It was now a pale shade of orange, and its sleeves had been cut off. Rocky walked to the open door of the hut. Outside was a creaky wooden balcony with a fence around it. Steps led down to a sun-bleached jetty. 15 feet away, it stopped. Then there was nothing but sea, its waves like egg cartons, and a far horizon with the sun shining above it. Molly joined Rocky and picked up a large mother-of-pearl shell from the balcony. "It all looks so familiar," she said. She licked her lips and tasted the salty air. "Like we've been here before," agreed Rocky. At that moment, Petula came around the corner of the hut. "Oh, Petula!" Molly knelt down and hugged Petula to her, burying her face in her fur. Moments ago, she'd thought she'd never see Petula again. Petula wagged her tail and gave Molly's face a friendly lick. "Petula must have died too," Molly paused. "But hang on a minute. I don't feel dead at all. I just feel as if we've been here for ages and ages," Rocky finished. "Because I know that jetty. I know exactly where to dive off it," said Molly, frowning. "And the shell you're holding," said Rocky. "I think I found it, but I can't remember how." Rocky and Molly looked at each other. Their hut seemed to be set at the bottom of a sheer cliff. There was a cave, but there was no visible access by land. The cliff face continued for miles. They could be anywhere in the world, Molly thought. There were absolutely no clues to tell them where, except that the temperature was balmy. "We've been here for ages without realizing it," said Molly. "It feels like some sort of time hurricane has swirled us up and carried us here." "I think," said Rocky, "we've been hypnotized." A gull let out a harsh cry above them. At the same time, a noise came from the side of the hut. Turning, Molly and Rocky saw a blond man in a blue tracksuit walking toward them. He held 2 full glasses in his hands. It was Sinclair's cell. "Happy New Year! Thank you, Brooke." "A cube for you," he said to Rocky, "and for you, Molly. A grenadine concentrate on the rocks." Molly felt as if her feelings were in a washing machine. First she thought she was dead. Then she felt relief that she wasn't. Then amazement had taken over, and now she was very scared. This man wanted her dead. He must have come to kill her. She backed away, wondering if they could escape by jumping into the sea. She looked at the drinks in his hands. Did he want to poison her and Rocky this time? Then her shocked brain seemed to shift as she realized that he hadn't killed her before. The magpie hadn't speared them. And a fierce anger rose in Molly. She concluded that Sinclair had been their hypnotist. Outrage gripped her. Like a chameleon changing color, Molly's mood was transformed from fear to fury. "So you've been nosing about in our brains, have you?" she spat at him. "Kept us like rabbits in a hutch and made us tell you everything you wanted to know about our lives? How long have we been your little hypnotized guinea pigs? 2 weeks? 3? Sinclair put the drinks down on a driftwood table. "Oh dear, I thought you might react like this," he said kindly. "Molly, I saved your lives." But Molly was raging. Even if you save someone's life, it doesn't give you the right to go rummaging around in their minds. Sinclair shook his head. "I didn't." "Do you think we believe that?" Molly looked scornfully at him. "Well, I know what you did do. You switched our lives off, didn't you?" Sinclair looked at his feet. "How many weeks?" Molly demanded. Sinclair nudged a shell with the toe of his shoe. He'd been dreading this moment. 7.5 months, he said quietly. Molly was dumbstruck. She counted the months in her head. That means that she and Rocky had been living without their identities for half of March, April, May, June, July, August, September, and October. "What date is it?" she whispered. Sinclair told her. "It's the 3rd of November." "Wow!" exclaimed Rocky. "But what about the others?" cried Molly. "Miss Trinkleberry, Gemma, Jerry, and everyone else, too, back at the orphanage. Where are they?" "They're fine. They're all living in Malibu. The others have flown over from Briarsville. I rented a big house for them on the coast. They're fine, I promise." This is when Molly blew up. "You promise? Who are you to promise anything to us? Do you think we'd trust you after you blanked out 7.5 months of our lives? Do you think you're God or something? You're crazy. Come on, Rocky, let's go. There must be some way out of here." She strode around the corner of the hut in the direction Sinclair had appeared from. Rocky shook his head in disgust and followed. A burly 7-foot bouncer stepped out from the side veranda and blocked their way. "I'm sorry, Molly and Rocky," Sinclair apologized, "but you have to listen to me. First of all, though, I'll give you your memories back." Sinclair clapped his hands and said firmly, "Remember." It was as if flood barriers in Molly and Rocky's minds were swept away. Months and months full of summer memories poured through their brains, tickling their synapses with sights and sounds and smells and feelings of days spent living by the sea. Memories of catching fish and cooking them over an open fire, of Rocky playing the guitar, of reading scores of books, collecting shells, swimming, snorkeling, surfing, of Rocky losing a toenail, of kite flying, painting, writing, throwing sticks for Petula, sitting around the campfire at night, singing songs, of learning to speak a new language. "Hemos aprendido a hablar español?" "Have we learned to speak Spanish?" asked Rocky. "Sí," said the big guy, whose name was Earl. If I wiped out 7 months, oh my god. "I thought you might as well learn a language," explained Sinclair. Molly discovered many lovely memories of Sinclair throughout the summer. Not the lazy, vain, murderous son of Primo Sal, but Sinclair as a friend. She looked at his familiar face, his shoulder-length hair, his sympathetic blue eyes, and felt confused. "But why?" she asked. Why did you keep us hypnotized? Because you wouldn't have stayed, said Sinclair. So maybe we wouldn't have stayed, began Molly, but it's up to us what we do with our lives, not you. So even if we did have an amazing summer, it wasn't our choice. That's the point, Sinclair. You should have let us choose for ourselves. I couldn't risk it. Why? Not the Spanish. 2 reasons. 1, I was worried that you wouldn't give up on beating Primo. The next time he caught you, he'd make sure you died. 2, there was the problem of my own safety. Primo would kill me if he knew that I'd betrayed him by saving you. So how did you save us? Molly asked quietly, taking a sip of her grenadine. She was beginning to feel she could trust Sinclair. From the top of the stairs, I watched you holding the world still, he said. I couldn't deprogram the bird, because only Primo has the combination code. I waited as you got more and more tired, until you had almost given up, and just before you did, I took over and stopped the world too. So there were 2 of us, you and me, freezing the world? Yes. Anyway, you fainted and froze, and of course, Rocky froze with you, Sinclair explained. When you blacked out, time didn't start again because I was holding it still. The magpie never hit you because I was holding it back. Then I immediately released you, and Earl and I, he pointed to his bodyguard, we carried you away. We came straight here, to the hut. Weren't you scared Sel would catch you? A little, but he thought I was clearing up all the mess, hosing all the blood down the drains and getting rid of the bodies. Does he kill everyone who's a threat to him? Asked Rocky. No, answered Sinclair. Everyone just disappears. Primo wipes away their identities, making sure they don't know who they are ever again. He turns them into lost souls who hear voices in their heads. Then he dumps them in faraway places. Like garbage. Yes, nobody will ever know who they are, least of all themselves. Sinclair shifted uncomfortably, obviously not enjoying the conversation. But Molly was too full of questions to let him be. Didn't you ever try to save them? Yes, but Primo never involved me in the identity wiping, so it was difficult to help. If I'm honest, there were some who I might have been able to help, but I was scared. I hate myself for that, but you see, I'm not a hero. I'm weak. You saved us, said Molly. That was brave. But why didn't you go to the police? Molly, Primo controls the LA police. He controls practically the whole of the American police force. You have no idea how powerful he is. The same goes for the newspapers. Most of the editors are under his thumb. If I went to reporters and told them everything, Primo would know about it immediately. Then he'd get me. Hello, Maple. Aw, thank you. Couldn't you dehypnotize some of his victims? Suggested Rocky. You can stop the world too. We know Sel makes his hypnosis permanent by stopping time. You could stop it again and dehypnotize them. Sounds easy, said Sinclair. What you don't know is that Primo uses special secret passwords. It's what completely locks in his hypnosis. Passwords? Said Molly. Yes, they're the real keys. Without his passwords, his victims can't be released. I don't know what Primo's passwords are. So why did you finally wake us up? Asked Molly. Because I need your help. Since your ordeal in the Magpie Chamber, something else has happened. Primo has become much more dangerous. Time is running out. It's about E-Day, isn't it? Said Rocky. It must be getting closer. Yes. What does it mean? Asked Molly. You don't know? No, they said in unison. E-Day, said Sinclair. It's election day. Sinclair looked at Molly and Rocky's quizzical expressions. Prismo intends to become the next president of the United States. But he can't, said Molly incredulously. To become president, you have to have hundreds of supporters. You have to be in charge of a whole political party. You have to have been a politician for years. This is a little dated. That's not true. Anyone can become president. Unfortunately, said Sinclair, as long as they were born in America and are 35 years or older. It's November the 3rd now, and Primo began his campaign in June. Really late, but he's done it brilliantly. Sinclair proceeded to tell them about the summer's Sell for President campaign. Sell had pumped millions and millions of dollars into it, running as an independent, meaning that he didn't belong to any political party. The campaign had stretched the length and breadth of America and had been so intense and lavish that every citizen of the country couldn't fail to know about him. Sell for President posters had adorned thousands of walls. Sell for President hot air balloons had floated over cities and towns. He'd been to every state and rented stadiums where the public had been treated to the spectacle of their favorite celebrities making speeches. Sell's hypnotized stars had talked about how much better life would be with him as president and why they'd be voting for Sell. At each venue, Sell had given a speech, his face projected so it was 100 feet high on screens. Everyone who looked at the screen was, of course, hypnotized by him. The splendor and power of his campaign had completely overshadowed Gandoli's and the other candidates. The desire for Sell as president had spread like a wildly contagious disease. American souls and American cells need America's Sell. That was his slogan. You're talking as if Election Day already happened, Rocky observed. Sinclair shuffled and looked at his feet. It already has. It already has? Cried Molly, so loudly that Petula barked. And what happened? Did he win? Sinclair avoided her eyes. He dropped a newspaper at her feet. Primo Sell wins presidential race, ran the headline. It was a landslide victory, Sinclair mumbled. Election Day always happens on the first Tuesday in November. That was yesterday, November the 2nd. This is this morning's paper. For a moment, there was silence. Then Molly's tongue and brain connected. Are you crazy, Sinclair? Why did you wait this long to wake us up? We could have sabotaged his campaign. We could have tried to work out his passwords. We could have done something. But instead, you left us here. Are you stupid or something? Get him, Molly. Get him. Get his ass. Molly paused. I'm sorry, Sinclair. It just seems to me you've left it much, much too late to wake us up. I couldn't risk it. Dad thought you were dead, and that's what has kept you safe, said Sinclair. But today, after his victory, Sinclair's voice shook. I had a crazy hope that he wouldn't win, but of course he did. Now he's the most dangerous man on the planet. Molly thought of Sell as a huge, slimy creature with slithery tentacles reaching into every country of the world. Why does he want to be so powerful? She said. Because he's crazy, said Sinclair. I don't know. Molly suddenly felt sorry for Sinclair. It had to be very difficult for him to betray his own father. She also thought he must be a very good person. After all, as Primo Sell rose to the top, he took Sinclair with him. But Sinclair didn't want that ride. He cared more about other people than himself. Oh, I wish this hadn't happened, moaned Molly. He's not actually president yet, said Sinclair more brightly. Molly and Rocky looked perplexed. Sinclair explained. There is a bit of hope. At the moment, Primo is president-elect. He has a few months to prepare his advisors and organize his government before he's handed the reins of power by the current president. This is how it always works. He's not the president until he's sworn in on January 20th. We still have time to blow him off his tracks. The security around Sell is going to be double, triple now, Rocky said. But I'm his son, and he trusts me, said Sinclair. At least, he does at the moment. And he doesn't know you're alive, Molly, so we've got an ace up our sleeve. Molly was beginning to think that Sinclair was as crazy as Primo Sell. The reality of the sinister hypnotist becoming president of the United States was more than her mind could cope with. What could she, a child, possibly do about it? I can't help you, Sinclair. Look what happened when I tried before. I am not the magic solution to all of this. You're wrong, said Sinclair. There is a tiny window of hope, but I don't want to talk about it now. He jumped up, eager to change the subject. I'll tell you about it at my house. Earl handed him a baseball cap, some sunglasses, and keys. And no doubt you'll want to know about your gang in Malibu. Where are we going? Asked Molly. Back to Hollywood. There's someone special I want you to meet. Let me drink some Coke. So they're not dead. Yay! The cave in the cliffs behind the hut was amazing. Sinclair and Earl led Molly, Petula, and Rocky over a narrow walkway into the spacious, greenly lit cavern. The water inside was 10 feet deep and so clear that they could see the sandy bottom. Stalactites clung to the damp, algaed ceiling. At the far end was a concrete wall, and set in this was the steel door of an elevator. Minutes later, they were all shooting smoothly upward inside the cave. At the top, a cream suede-covered wall and a highly polished glass door greeted them. Sinclair pressed a button on the wall. The door slid open, and they found themselves standing outside the concrete bunker that housed the elevator. It was disguised to look like a large rock. The view was spectacular. Hawaii is over there, Sinclair pointed out. Perhaps when all this is over, we can make sure Primo lends you his private jet. Have we learned how to fly planes? Asked Molly, wrinkling her nose as she tried to remember the lessons. No, laughed Sinclair. It comes with a pilot. Sinclair's Aston Martin was parked beside the concrete bunker. Petula barked at him to open the door. It was windy on the cliff top, and the breeze was getting under her fur. They all climbed in. Sinclair revved the engine until it sounded like a lion purring. Soon they were driving up a winding, walled track to the cliff's summit. Before them was a highway. This is the Pacific Coast Highway, said Sinclair. It goes all the way up the west coast of America. That way, he pointed to his left, is north, San Francisco, then Portland, Seattle, until you get to Canada. And this way, he gestured to his right, is south, Malibu, then Los Angeles, and eventually Mexico. Wow, where are we now? This is a place called Dune Beach. It's a 2-hour drive to get back to Hollywood, so let's hit the road. The Aston Martin swooped out onto the highway. If we're passing Malibu, can we drop in and see everyone? Asked Molly. Sinclair shook his head and put the gear shift into power drive. Sorry, not just yet, Molly. At the moment, they think you're working for the benefactor. I had to hypnotize them all to not worry about you being gone. I hope you don't mind. But they're really all fine, and if you reunite today, there's a danger that Primo, I always want to call him Prismo, that Primo would find out that you're still alive, and we don't want that. Molly held Petula on her lap and settled back onto the blue leather upholstery. She shut her eyes. She felt quite strange, as if she'd traveled up a time shaft, up the cylinder of time in which she'd viewed the summer and autumn months, but hadn't properly experienced them. So this is what it felt like to be hypnotized over a long period. Molly felt guilty about the people whose minds she'd meddled with, although she didn't feel bad about hypnotizing Knockman to be better. He was enjoying life more, wasn't he? And soon her hypnotism of him would wear off completely, and he would have metamorphized into a good person. What have Knockman and Miss Trinkleberry been doing? Anything exciting? Yes, they have, Sinclair replied, smiling as he pressed the stereo controls. If you want some in-car entertainment, look at the screen. A small screen on the ceiling in front of them flickered. And to Rocky and Molly's amazement, a home video began. It showed all the children from the orphanage having some sort of party with Mr. Knockman and Miss Trinkleberry. The microphone picked up the end of a speech that Knockman was making. Now at last, he said, I know how wonderful the world is. Everyone clapped. Whose birthday? Asked Molly. Knockman's? No, it's a party to celebrate Mr. Knockman and Mrs. Trinkleberry's engagement. It was in July. Their what? Molly and Rocky stared in shock. Are you sure? Said Molly. Are they, in love? Yep, like 2 turtle doves. Yuck, said Rocky. Well, they're very happy, said Sinclair. Molly looked at Rocky. As long as he doesn't lead her into a life of crime. No way, said Sinclair. From what I see, the guy's nuts about her, and will do whatever needs to be done to please her. Well, I'm happy if Miss T is, said Molly. What about the others? Sinclair fast-forwarded the tape. In a sitting room, Gemma and Jerry put on a show for the other orphanage children. Gemma invited Hazel to come forward and said she was going to hypnotize her. Molly and Rocky couldn't believe it. Gemma and Gary then hypnotized Hazel and convinced her that she was on the top of a very high wall, and that every time Gemma blew, the wall swayed. Hazel lay flat in the middle of a stage, trying not to be blown off. But who taught them? Asked Rocky. You did, said Sinclair. Well, indirectly. Me? Yeah, said Sinclair. It seems you photocopied the original hypnotism book, and they found a part of the copy. They're quite good at looking like they're real hypnotists. But they are real, aren't they? Their show looks brilliant. Well, don't be too deceived. Hazel's acting. Gemma and Jerry have no hypnotic skills at all, I've checked. Mind you, they are very good animal trainers. Look at this. A table stood at the front of the same room with a miniature gymnasium on it. It had little slides and swings, seesaws, and merry-go-rounds. Molly and Rocky watched in wonder as Jerry got his mice to go down a slide, to ride on the swings, to seesaw, and to whiz around and around. They even stood on top of each other in little mouse triangles. Jerry sure can handle those mice, said Sinclair, as the tape came to an end. Petula glanced at the screen and blinked. For a while they drove in silence. Sinclair concentrated on the road, but he seemed agitated, speeding up and then slowing down again and tapping the steering wheel. It seemed as if he was trying to make up his mind about something. Molly thought how difficult it must be for him to be betraying his own father. Then, as if the same subject was troubling Sinclair, he said, "You know, Primo Cell isn't my real dad. He adopted me. And my sister Sally, too." He opened a cabinet below the glove compartment. Inside was a tiny refrigerator. He reached for some drinks. "Adopted?" Molly and Rocky said in surprised unison. "Hiccupy." "You got it," said Sinclair, handing Rocky a bottle of water. "Sally and I aren't real brother and sister." Molly and Rocky were fascinated. Being orphans themselves, the subject of adoption was very close to their hearts. What was more, neither had ever before met a person outside the orphanage who'd been adopted, so both listened intently to Sinclair as he told them his life story. It turned out that he and Sally had first been adopted at the ages of 4 and 5 by a ringmaster and his wife, who had owned a circus. It was, Sinclair said, as if a huge family had taken them in. He and Sally had been extremely happy. The ringmaster was also a performing hypnotist. Unfortunately, he was such a good one that, when he came to Primo Cell's attention, Cell thought he was a threat, and so got rid of him. He hypnotized the circus couple. They were now gardeners at Magpie Manor. The young Sinclair and Sally came to live with Cell. He seduced them with a new, glamorous lifestyle, giving them everything they wanted. Miniature cars to drive, fantastic bedrooms, a home with a movie theater and a pool, a country house with horses to ride, and vacations by the sea where there were always big boats, jet skis, and all the toys they wanted. He got them a home tutor. One day, he said, they'd run his empire. When they were 10 and 11, he began to train them as hypnotists. "But," said Sinclair, his voice bitter, "from the day he took away my circus parents' freedom, I hated him. I saw he had no heart. I vowed that I would do everything I could to stop him ever needing to hypnotize me. I played my part. I pretended I loved him like a son loves a father. But underneath, I didn't. I hated him. Sally made mistakes. She disagreed with him once too often. Primo hypnotized her, but he's never hypnotized me. He likes to think that there's at least one person out there who likes him, not just because they've been hypnotized too. But, as I told you, I don't like him at all. I loathe him." Molly looked out the sea and the millions of tiny ripples on the water. She didn't know how to react to Sinclair's life history. At this moment, she just felt bowled over by all the day's surprises. Molly knew she had other questions to ask Sinclair, but she couldn't remember what they were. Instead, overcome by the vibrations of the car and the hum of the engine, she fell asleep, and Petula snuggled up to her, very relieved that the real Molly was back at last. Sinclair lived in a house in the Hollywood Hills. The car growled in low gear as it negotiated the steep, tree-lined road. On either side, snug buildings hugged the slopes. "All these houses are seismically safe. That means they're built to withstand earthquakes," said Sinclair. "Mine too." He turned into a drive. His house was a modern, blocky building supported on columns. They climbed out in a parking court underneath it, where the pillars were covered with tropical ivy and bougainvillea. Sinclair led them toward an elevator door. "I can see you don't like stairs much," said Molly as they swept upward. Then, wow! Both she and Rocky exclaimed as they stepped into Sinclair's living room. A panoramic window gave spectacular views of Los Angeles. and the famous Hollywood sign, looking like a giant geography book label, was stuck on the hillside only a mile or so away. In the window was a long, curved window seat. Petula jumped up and made herself comfortable. Molly looked out. A narrow aqueduct, supported on towers and filled with water, snaked away from the house, over trees and the hill and a road. Then it looped back again and entered the building below a gap in the glass window. It curled round the back of the room where it rejoined its tail before it set off again on its route back towards the tree, hill, and road. "That's my lap pool," said Sinclair. "I love it. Some days I swim around once, away from the house and back. Other days I swim 10 loops. "It's so cool," said Rocky. "I'd love to have a swim in it," said Molly. "You can. Let me show you around the rest of the place," invited Sinclair. His bedroom was circular, and so was the bed in the middle of it. Ever slept on a waterbed? Molly and Rocky tried it out. "Weird," said Molly. "Must be like sleeping on jelly." "It's really comfortable," said Sinclair, activating a switch. The water in the bed began to vibrate. "It's very relaxing," he told them, but the wobbling waterbed just made Molly and Rocky giggle. Sinclair lived in style. He had it all. He showed them his screening room, where he could watch the latest films, his computer room, and his dark room. Newly developed photographs clipped onto a wire trellis showed what Sinclair had been taking pictures of recently. There were Molly and Rocky rowing a boat, with Petula perched between them. Rocky playing his guitar, Molly holding a conch shell up to her ear, listening to the sea. There were also some photographs of Petula. She was being kissed by Gloria Heelheart. "I completely forgot," cried Sinclair. "While you were, away, Petula starred in a film. It's directed by Gino Pucci. See, that's him in this picture." "Petula starred in a film?" Molly stared at the photograph. "How come?" "Gino met her at the Academy Awards. Apparently so did Gloria Heelheart," Sinclair said. "Ah, yes," admitted Molly. "Petula and I, met her in the ladies' room." Gloria adored her, and so did Gino. He tracked Petula down. Miss Trinkleberry gave him permission to hire her. The film's called Thunder Roll, and it's out in 10 days. "What a pug!" Molly beamed. She felt really proud. "Petula, you're a star, and so clever to organize it all yourself." "She got paid a nice fat fee, too," said Sinclair. "She'll be able to eat steak as often as she wants." Molly gave Petula an extra specially tight hug. Petula wondered what all the fuss was about. Then Molly noticed a picture of a crystal. "Where's my crystal?" she asked. "I had to give it to Primo," said Sinclair. "He wanted me to take it off you once you were dead." "Great," said Molly. "I've still got mine." Sinclair pulled his crystal from under his shirt. "You can borrow it if you need it." "Thanks." Molly felt really annoyed that Primo Cell had her crystal, as well as his own. "Look," said Sinclair, "if we ever get Primo under control, I can get all the crystals back from him, and then you can have 2 or 3. "Why? How many has he got?" 18, including yours. They've all come from other hypnotists. He sits on them like an old magpie." "What I want to know," said Rocky, examining the photograph, "is how come so many hypnotists have these? I mean, how did they all know the power that the crystals would give them? Molly didn't know. She just found hers by accident." "The truth," said Sinclair, "is very mysterious. I don't think that those other hypnotists knew they needed crystals either. I think the crystals found their owners for themselves. It's as if they have minds of their own. They don't, of course, but I believe they are drawn in a magnetic way towards hypnotists." "Do they move by themselves?" asked Molly, aghast. "No, but it seems that they cause urges in humans to move them. They can manipulate people to put them nearer and nearer to where they want to be." "Which is where?" "Near hypnotists." "But why?" "So they can be used for their true purpose, maybe. I don't know. It's completely mysterious. They've got a homing instinct, like eels." "What do eels do?" "Every year, eels swim out of the rivers of Europe all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to the Sargasso Sea, where they breed. Then the eels' larvae return to the European seas, where they turn into elvers," and you're getting lots of random lessons today, "and swim up exactly the same rivers that their parents came from, even though they never met their parents. Then, after about 10 years, when those elvers have grown into big eels, they swim to the Sargasso Sea to breed. No one tells the baby elvers what their parents did. They just know to do it. Of course, these crystals aren't alive, but they seem to have some built-in instinct, just like animals. It makes them attracted to hypnotists. I thought scientists might explain the mystery. I've hypnotized some of them. No one has been able to work out how these crystals and hypnotists and stopping the world are connected. Oh. So, Primo has a collection of crystals, said Rocky, like his collection of hypnotism books. Just like that. Horrible, said Molly. At least he hasn't gotten his thieving hands on Lucy Logan's copy of the hypnotism book. Her voice leaped. Lucy Logan, I said I'd call her, and I haven't been in touch for months. She must think I'm dead. Sinclair frowned. It was then that Molly learned some terrible news. Sinclair told her that soon after the Magpie episode, he'd overheard Primo Cell talking to someone called Lucy on the phone. After the conversation, Sinclair had traced the call and discovered that the number was in Briarsville. At that time, he hadn't known about Lucy Logan, so he thought nothing of it. But a few days later, when the hypnotized Molly had talked about Lucy, he'd realized who this telephone caller must be. Sinclair had come to a distressing conclusion. After Molly disappeared, Lucy must have decided to call Cell to try and hypnotize him over the phone. Not realizing how masterful a long-distance hypnotist Cell was, she had been hypnotized instead. She was, Sinclair said, one of the enemy now. Molly put her head in her hands as she contemplated this dreadful news. At least, she said, at least I suppose she isn't in any more danger. At least being on Cell's side means she won't have any more car accidents. Then the reality of Lucy's being brainwashed by Cell hit Molly. This is so depressing. Poor Lucy. She knew about Cell and she hated him. Molly thought about the afternoon she'd spent, sitting in Lucy's basement room looking at her videos. So, Sinclair, was Lucy right about Davina? Did Cell kidnap her? She was completely right, said Sinclair. Cell was in New York, and he had problems hypnotizing her. I don't know why. Anyway, Davina then suspected what he was up to. Cell felt she had to be removed. He used his crystal and stopped time so no one saw her being taken. Davina's been living at Magpie Manor all year. He keeps her like a caged bird in very beautiful quarters there. She's given everything she wants, as long as she sings for him. He guards her like a hawk. She's impossible to get near to. It's very strange. Poor Davina. And as for Lucy, I can't bear it. I felt lovely down on the beach today with no worries. Now I'm full of them again. Molly, I know how you must feel, said Sinclair, but you've got to rise above your feelings. We've all got to, because now the most important thing to do is to stop Cell being sworn in as president. To do this, we've got to break his pyramid of power. You've got a job to do, Molly. You've got to do something I've never been able to do. You've got to figure out Primo's password so you can de-hypnotize everyone. But how can I find out his passwords? They're in his head, hissed Molly. Molly, you have an extraordinary gift when it comes to hypnosis. I think it's an instinct in you. You know, like the eels. This instinct might show you how to extract the passwords from Primo. I'm not going near him, said Molly, her hackles up. You don't have to go near him, said Sinclair. The person I wanted you to meet is a friend who's going to teach you something that maybe you can get into Cell's head without being remotely near him. Molly looked alarmed. Had Sinclair gone absolutely bananas? I've tried enough, she declared. Look what's happened to Lucy. I told you, Sinclair, I'm not magic. You're stressed out, said Rocky. The time has come, said Sinclair, for you to meet Forrest. Forrest? What's that? A country walk under trees? No, Sinclair laughed. Forrest is my yoga meditation teacher. Sinclair went to the window and wolf whistled. A few minutes later, in came a tall, very thin guy with gray hair and dreadlocks that fell to his waist and bottle-thick glasses. He wore baggy white sweatpants and a zipper top, with socks and flip-flops on his feet. Hi, nice to meet you both, Molly, Rocky. I've heard so much about you. Forrest, it turned out, had been a yogic meditation teacher for 10 years. Before that, he'd traveled the world. He lived as a hermit in a cave in France for 3 years, contemplating the meaning of life, eating nothing but nuts and berries, insects, and canned soup. Later, he'd traveled to the depths of the Amazon jungle with a group of monks who didn't believe in cutting their hair. He'd stayed with a hardy bunch of Inuits and learned to build igloos. He'd spent 11 months in a treehouse in Sri Lanka, hitchhiked across India, and caravaned on a camel across the Kalahari Desert. Now, he lived in LA, where he was Sinclair's personal yoga teacher. His small apartment was downstairs. He had a yard where he kept chickens and a glass-blowing workshop. He was responsible for all the beautiful mirrored sculptures on the coffee table. Molly wondered whether Sinclair had hypnotized him to stay put. "What is yogic meditation?" she asked as Forrest sat down cross-legged on the floor. "Well," began Forrest in a deep voice that reminded Molly of a rock-filled mountain river, "yogic meditation is making your body comfortable so you can tune in and pick up the positive vibes of the universe." Forrest suddenly lay back and swung both his feet up to his head, where he hooked them around his neck. His head poked out between his calves, and his arms lay flat on the floor where his legs should have been. He looked like a human knot. So comfortable," he sighed, shutting his eyes. "Now I concentrate on nothing, and the more I see nothing, the more the light of nothing fills me up until I'm—" Molly and Rocky waited. "Until you're what?" asked Molly. "I think he's gone," whispered Rocky. "He's meditating," said Sinclair. "How long does he stay like that?" asked Molly. "An hour? A day? I wish I could do it, but I can't. Sometimes Forrest travels long distances in his head. It's called astral projection. He can go on a trip to his friends in India, and if they're meditating too, they have a kind of astral meeting." "Sounds like a good excuse for a long nap," said Molly. Sinclair ignored her. "Besides," he said, "Forrest focused his mind so that he can walk on fire." "Or water?" asked Molly. "Or air?" suggested Rocky. Sinclair didn't register their cynicism. "I'm hoping," he went on, "that Forrest will help you focus your mind and relax so that you are in the best possible state to surf the cosmic airways and telepathically extract Primo's passwords." "Are you really?" said Molly, as if Sinclair had just asked her to flap her arms and fly. She had heard about Californian New Age spiritualism, and as far as she could see, it was complete nonsense. "Don't be negative," said Sinclair. "Forrest will put you in touch with your instinct. You wait. You'll be amazed at yourself." Sinclair left Molly and Rocky to study the knotted-up man on the floor. Forrest let out a squeaky fart. Rocky and Molly found themselves stifling mouthfuls of giggles. "Don't know about getting in touch with my instinct," said Molly quietly. "But his instinct is going to be unavoidable." Great joke, Molly. The next few days were quiet ones. Sinclair left for Washington, D.C., where Primo was organizing his new team of government advisors. It was very important for Sinclair to keep up the pretense of being Primo's loyal son and right-hand man, so he had to help when he was asked. But it was also suited to his plans to be near to Primo, as he needed to know his movements. Back in the Hollywood Hills house, as far as Molly could make out, Forrest wasn't teaching her anything that would help her extract passwords from Sel's mind. Still, she enjoyed spending time with him. Next to his studio apartment, Forrest had a lovely flower-filled garden. It was a kaleidoscope of color with mosaics underfoot and trellises of herbs along its walls. He introduced Molly and Rocky to his chickens and fed them each a home-laid egg. He showed them how to blow glass. He put a cold lump of it into a long metal pipe, heated it up on a fierce flame, and carefully blew through the pipe until the hot glass blistered into a bubble. Forrest also taught them to meditate. Rocky tried to concentrate, but he found throwing a frisbee for Petula was much more fun than sitting with eyes shut beside Forrest. Molly, on the other hand, found it very relaxing. She had always been able to switch off her mind and float up into space, so she was very good at it. As her mind drifted up like a cloud, bobbing above the Hollywood sign, and climbed further until Sinclair's house was too small to be visible and Los Angeles disappeared beneath her, Molly pondered how minuscule she was. 12.5 million people lived in Los Angeles, and she was only one person in that vast population. As she floated higher in her imaginary universe and considered the 6 billion people in the world, Molly felt even tinier. For a moment, she let herself believe in Forrest. If she could discover Sel's passwords, if she could stop Sel from being sworn in as president, stop him from becoming the most powerful man in the world, then her action would be huge. Huger than huge. As she floated, Molly felt microscopic and at the same time massive. A giddy combination. But it was good, because the small feeling stopped the big feeling from making Molly believe she was some sort of important superhuman being. How do very famous people feel when they know that so many people in the world know them? Do they think they're superhuman? She asked Forrest as she sat on the floor one day, sorting out good lumps of colored glass from bad ones. The stupid ones do, said Forrest. The smart ones realize that they've been lucky to be born who they are, with talents, and lucky to have gotten into situations that catapult them to the top. They know fame doesn't make a well-known person any better than an unknown person. Fame is like a pyramid, with really famous people at the top, less famous people underneath, and completely unknown people at the bottom. But happiness is like an egg. You can say that the happiest people are at the top of the egg, the middling happy ones are in the middle, and the unhappy ones are at the bottom. There are lots of famous people who are unhappy at the bottom of that egg. I'd rather be at the top of that egg than the top of the pyramid. So, Molly persisted, why do people think fame is so special? Maybe, wrongly, they think that fame is the key to happiness. I know lots of people who are always reading about the lives of stars, and they wish they were famous too. Those magazines are full of chicken dung. After a while, readers of those magazines start to feel that their own lives are chicken dung. And that's not good, to think that your own life is chicken dung. Chicken dung stinks. I should know. Molly looked outside at the bantam that seemed to be laying an egg in one of Forrest's walking boots. Life's like a summer vacation, Molly. It's over in a flash. We're all made of carbon molecules from stars, and in a flash, when we die, we'll be that same stardust again. So, we may not all be stars, said Molly, but we are all stardust. You got it, Forrest shut his eyes. There's power to be found when you discover the dust in yourself. Often, then, you find the big side of yourself too. Molly doubted that these life-probing conversations with Forrest were going to lead her to Primo Cell's passwords, but Forrest didn't seem to have any specific lessons for this telepathy that Sinclair had talked about. I feel your energy is good, Molly, Forrest continued. You must look for the Nanu of Small. Who's the Nanu of Small? Molly asked, thinking the Nanu sounded like a wrinkled, billion-year-old person. It's not a person. Nanu just means the smallest. And if you look for the smallest of small in yourself, Molly, there you will find your true power. Thanks, said Molly. I'll remember that. Sometimes she thought Forrest was just bang out there weird. The few days of relaxing came to an abrupt end. Primo Cell had decided that his Washington headquarters were now under control. With his new presidential power, all sorts of money-making opportunities had opened up, and he was organizing a big conference for foreign business people back in Los Angeles. Sinclair arrived home one morning, looking rattled. As he put his case down and the elevator door shut behind him, he said to Molly and Rocky, I told Primo I had to go home and do some meditation with Forrest, but he didn't like it. His countenance was as gloomy as the gray weather outside. It was getting difficult, he explained, for him to escape from Primo Cell at all. Primo wanted him to move into his mansion so he could be on call day and night. Sinclair didn't know how much longer he could keep up his act. He was finding it more and more of a strain to do what Primo told him. He was sure that Cell would soon smell a rotten haddock, and then, he knew, he'd finally get a dose of Cell's eyes. Molly and Rocky had been allowed to go for swims in Sinclair's lap pool and walks in the garden, but now, with his new paranoia, he forbade them to go out at all. Sinclair was worried that Cell might be spying on his house. He had often employed spies in the past, he said. Molly and Rocky had to stay hidden. A fog descended. Molly wished she could get out of the house. She began a game of chess with Rocky, while Sinclair paced the room, occasionally gazing out the view, lost in thought. Eventually, he spoke. There's only one way of dealing with Primo. You don't mean kill him? Molly glanced up from the chessboard. We can't. We're not murderers. How about a good hypnotist? Molly put down the pawn she was about to move and shook her head in disbelief. She knew what was going on in Sinclair's mind. Have you ever managed to hypnotize Cell, Sinclair? I tried once, said Sinclair, when I was younger. Primo thought it was funny. He knows I could never hypnotize him. My power is nothing to his. He's got that extra something. There's only one other person I've ever met who has it too. Petula whined. She felt Molly beginning to get agitated. Molly, you do have that extra something. You must know you do, Sinclair plowed on. When I saved you from the magpie, the only reason I was able to hypnotize you was because your strength had been exhausted. Otherwise, you would have been able to resist me. When I saw those ads you did in New York, I recognized your true power. Your eyes are as powerful as Cell's. Molly got up and walked to the far end of the window. Don't make me try and hypnotize him, Sinclair, she said, looking out. Please don't. I wouldn't stand a chance. Not a chicken of a chance. You would, insisted Sinclair. I really believe you could do it. You have to say that, Molly said sadly, because I'm your last hope. She thought of Primo's cells sucking the memories out of her head and leaving her as empty as a dead packet of ketchup. This is so stupid, she said. There must be someone other than me who can do this. A grown-up hypnotist. I don't want to do it. All the others have been overcome by Primo, said Sinclair. Exactly. So what chance do I have? Cried Molly desperately. I'm sorry, said Sinclair. You don't have to do it. Of course you don't. He put his hands up against the glass of the window and leaned against it. But, please, think about it. It's your decision, and I will completely understand if you decide not to risk it. Sinclair swung around. But listen, Molly, I can get access to Primo. He trusts me. We can get him when he's off guard, when he's just woken up or is tired at the end of the day. Just imagine, Molly. Sinclair looked at his watch. Drat, I have to go now or he'll be wondering where I am. I've got to help him host a dinner. He's got the head of the FBI and the Deputy Prime Minister of Japan coming to meet Suki and Gloria. Sinclair gave Molly and Rocky a grim smile. I hope tonight's not my last. Then he patted Petula, took a deep breath, and went off to find his coat. Molly, Petula, and Rocky were left sitting, looking out the panoramic window. Great big tears rolled down Molly's cheeks. Sorry, Rocky, she managed to say through sniffs and hiccuping sobs. But I don't know what to do. Rocky took off a scarf that he'd wrapped around his wrist and gave it to her to wipe her nose on. He watched as his best friend shook with tears, and he felt terrible. There's got to be another way, said Molly at last. I don't want to end up with guacamole for a brain. I think there is another way, said Rocky thoughtfully, and I think I know what it is. How, you might ask, could a person of Primo Cell's position and with his immense power be brought down without Molly having to hypnotize him? The answer was, by attacking him from a completely unexpected direction. The best form of attack is always surprise, and Rocky's solution relied on this. He said that a head-on collision with Cell would never work. When Molly found out what his idea was, she refused to let Rocky risk his life alone and insisted on being the one who carried out the plan. Someone still had to face Cell, but it was in such a surprising way that Molly wanted to be that someone. 2 days later, Sinclair left to oversee the final arrangements for Primo's conference for foreign business leaders. The conference was being held at Cell Center, but it began with a formal reception and lunch at Primo's house. Early that morning, a top Hollywood makeup artist and costumer arrived at Sinclair's home. Of course, they had all been hypnotized. The two professionals set to work, and Molly watched with fascination as the tall, long-fingered master of disguise turned Rocky into somebody else. From 8 to 9, he worked on a new nose for him. Using special prosthetic rubber, he molded a majestic, chiseled nose onto his face. From 9 to 10, he worked on wrinkles and hair, giving Rocky dense black eyebrows and a short, dark beard. Rocky was put in padded underwear to make him look rotund, and then he was dressed in a black embroidered robe called a dishdasha, and a red and white head covering tied about with a band. The finished result was fantastic. Rocky looked like an authentic Arab. It's hot in here, he complained to Sinclair. What's my name again? Sheikh Yellowwheat. You're one of the richest oiled magnates? Whatever. In Saudi Arabia. And you're sure the real Yellowweed's not going to turn up? Absolutely sure. I told him the meeting was postponed. How about his size? Are you sure he's as small as me? Once you get these platform shoes on, promised the costumer, you'll be exactly 5'3", and that's how tall the Sheik is. Well, I might get away with it as long as I don't have to say anything, said Rocky nervously. While the finishing touches were being made on Rocky, Molly paid a visit to Forrest's workshop. He was dipping a piece of glass into a bowl of chemicals. It's nearly ready, he said. Molly thought of how she'd love to stay here all day with him. As if reading her mind, he patted her head and said, The Nanu of Small will protect you, Molly. Don't you worry. Even though this didn't make sense, for some reason, it did make Molly feel better. Upstairs, Molly took her turn to be transformed. She was dressed as Sheikah Yellowweed, the Sheik's wife. Like Rocky, she had padding to make her bigger, a flowing robe called an abaya. Molly's was purple, and platform shoes for height. But she didn't need much makeup, as her head was covered in a veil and her face, except for her eyes, was hidden by a black silk niqab. Around her eyes, her skin was tinted a darker hue. Finally, at midday, feeling very constricted by their new bodies and clothes, Molly and Rocky climbed into a black, chauffeur-driven limousine, looking and trying to feel like Arabs. They arrived at a guarded gate of Primo Sel's mansion. Their car was smoothly ushered through. Remembering the torture chamber beneath the house's foundations made Molly feel sick. So instead, she tried to think of Davina Natel, imprisoned somewhere within these walls, and of Davina's joy when she was freed, if their plan worked. The steel beast sculptures on the grounds glittered in the lunchtime sun, looking hungry and malevolent. She dreaded having to cross the cobbled courtyard on her platform shoes. Both she and Rocky had walking sticks, as if they were very old, but would these be enough to steady them? Sel's going to see through this act, Molly said frantically to Rocky. I look like something out of the Arabian Nights. Maybe we should go home. You look completely authentic, Rocky assured her. Now, let's go. His voice sounded muffled to Molly because, like him, Molly had stuffed her ears full of wax to make any verbal hypnotism that Sel might try powerless. Oh. With her mouth as dry as the Sahara Desert and her hands clammy from nerves, Molly took a grip on her silver walking stick and carefully emerged from the car. Hello! I did, a little bit, yes. The entrance was very busy with other cars arriving and guests making their way toward the house. Through her veil, Molly saw that the place was teeming with guards. Praise! Praise for the bun. Aw. Alright, we can do that. Let me take a sip first. This is a good little bun. Yeah, you're such a good girl for me, aren't you? You're a very, very good girl. Yeah, and it's so cute to watch you get all flustered. To watch you hide away and squeak when you get called a good girl or a good bun. Yeah, you're a very good girl, aren't you? I should read something from that. Well, considering that I stream on YouTube and Twitch and also occasionally TikTok, I don't think the contents of those kind of stories would be allowed. And we want to be able to keep streaming, of course. So, we're gonna not get in trouble for that. Through her veil, Molly saw that the place was teeming with guards. Security had obviously been increased for these foreign VIPs. Her body seized up. Rocky had to prod her with his gold-plated cane to make her take a step forward. The courtyard egg shot a burst of flame to welcome them. Even though Molly was expecting it, she lurched sideways. Sinclair helped his old Arabs down the front stairs. Then, using their age as an excuse, he led them through the marble hall, where the delegates were gathering, and straight to Primo Sel's conference room. This way they avoided any conversations with other guests, or worse still, with Primo himself. They passed a display showing the strength of Cell's biggest businesses: Primo Speed, the car manufacturer; CompuCell Computers, One Cell Medicine, Cell Oil. Huge photographs illustrated his most famous brands: Honey Wheat Puftas, Time Z watches, Bubbalot, Heaven bars, In the Groove deodorant, Sumptuous toilet paper, Mighty Lighty diet bars, Fashion House. The picture that made Molly the most nervous was of Schlick Schleck knives. In an empty, galleried room, a huge table was laid with 28 places. Each setting had a glass, and a bottle of mineral water in a silver holder, a cut glass, bowl of ice, and a few wrapped chocolates. Sinclair led Molly and Rocky to the side of the room where name cards for Sheik Yellowwheat and Chica Yellowwheat were placed halfway down the table. "Okay," said Sinclair quietly. "I'll leave you now. I'll start ushering the guests and their translators in. When everyone is gathered, Primo will make his entrance. Molly, I've put you next to him, on his left. He usually starts with the people opposite him, and then works his way clockwise around the table until he gets to the person on his immediate right. Then he'll turn to you. Good luck, and see you later." Molly sat down, her legs quivering and her heart beating fast. On the table in front of her was Cell's speech, transcribed into Arabic. Molly picked up the paper and pretended to read. "You're so very welcome." Sitting on cushions that Sinclair had put on their chairs, Molly and Rocky looked convincingly big, especially when very two small Filipino men sat down on the other side of Primo Cell's place. The Filipinos were very jolly. They chatted excitedly, opening their chocolates. They introduced themselves to Molly, who nodded, leaned toward them, shook their hands, and mumbled, "Sabah al-Khair," "I'm so sorry," in what she hoped was an Arabic accent. She fiddled with her veil and prayed that they wouldn't want to talk to her. Molly peered out through the slit in her niqab and watched the room fill up. An elegant Indian woman dressed in a red and orange sari arrived with her dark green suited partner. Then a Japanese couple sat down. The lady was in a specially creased yellow designer outfit and a peculiar corrugated triangular hat. More and more guests took their seats. Molly had never seen such an array of different colored skins or clothes of such colorful variety. Molly sat quietly, head down, pretending to read, but the writing danced sickeningly in front of her eyes. She tried to relax herself by meditating, but the tense situation was too distracting. Soon, 25 business people had taken their places around the great table. The room hummed. Everyone felt enormously privileged and flattered to have been invited to the president-elect's own home. They all hoped that their companies were about to receive big contract from the future president of the United States, and that they were going to make lots and lots of money. All at once, there was a loud clink-cling as Sinclair hit the side of a glass with a coffee spoon. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called, hushing the excited conversation, "please welcome the future president, Mr. Primo Cell." With a great aplomb, Primo strode down into the room. He smiled, nodded at his guests, and saluted everyone. He was wearing a black and white striped suit, and there was a fiery confidence in his eyes. He looked immaculately poised and calm, but Molly sensed that raging greed that lay underneath the surface of this act. "Welcome to you all," Cell began. "Good morning, bonjour, hola, sab akir, buongiorno, hi, konnichiwa, maraban. Thank you for traveling thousands of miles to be here today. I am extremely grateful. It is wonderful to see so many nations of the world represented, and I am glad that, as president-elect, I can now ensure that America will work with your enterprises." The translators around the table relayed his words to the guests, who murmured approval and listened intently as Cell continued. "In business, it is essential that you trust the person you are dealing with. If you look into my eyes, I hope you will all see that I am someone you can trust." Molly was amazed at how quickly Cell was operating. Every person in the room politely and obediently turned their eyes towards him. "Yes," continued Cell in his beautifully modulated velvet voice, "if you look into my eyes, you will see that you can trust me entirely." and as he talked, he began to hypnotize the company. The wax in both Molly and Rocky's ears muffled his voice. Both sat motionless, concentrating very hard on not listening. Molly sang the words of the magpie song loudly in her head. Steal your heart, magpie man. Wants the sun and the stars and you. Ooh, magpie man. Now Molly could feel the fusion feeling rising all around her as Primo Cell, the supreme master of hypnotism, went systematically around the table, overpowering every single person. As Sinclair had said he would, Cell had started on the guests opposite him. Now he was working on those to his right. He was knocking them down like 10 pins. Molly's moment was nearly upon her. She tried to breathe in the yogic way that Forrest had taught her, in one nostril and out through the other. But calm was impossible when her heart thumped like the hind leg of a kicking, terrified rabbit. She raised her head at exactly the right angle to look into Primo Cell's eyes. In a few seconds, he would turn his attention from the Filipino to his right and face her. In her hand, Molly held a coin-sized plastic counter. It was attached to a thin wire that led up her sleeve and under her veil. Now she pressed its button. A small concave mirrored plate, perfectly crafted by Forrest, which had been held in position under her niqab veil, slid down like a little curved door and filled the gap in front of her eyes. The mirror was two-way. Molly could see a black and white Cell through it. She would wait until the moment he turned and looked straight at her. Then she would snap her eyes tight shut. Primo Cell felt supremely confident. As he'd expected, the collection of hopeful entrepreneurs in the room were all dolts. There were just a few more to go. The Sheik and Sheikah Yalawit were next. Primo tilted his head toward the Sheikah. It was unusual for an Arab woman to be involved with her husband's business. Perhaps she was especially good at making decisions. He would give her an especially seductive hypnotic look, one she wouldn't be able to peel herself away from. Primo locked his eyes onto hers. Her eyes shone out from the slit in her veil, and to his surprise, he saw that they were like his own in color. One was turquoise, the other brown. Cell thought how rare and attractive the combination was. It is important to trust those you do business with, he insisted smoothly, smiling. Her eyes smiled back at him. Cell flinched in surprise. Was she resisting him? Primo Cell calmly and slowly repeated the few Arabic words that he knew. Oh, I'm so sorry. Marhaban tikum. I'm so sorry. Through the wax in Molly's ears, the words sounded muffled and like a spell. It was time, Cell decided, to give this Sheikah Yalawit a final annihilating blast. So, with a force of violent energy summoned from deep within him, he lasered a beam of hugely destructive eye power straight into the woman's eyes. It happened in a second. The bullet of his look hit Molly's mirrored visor and ricocheted back. Primo Cell's head swung sideways as if he'd just been punched by King Moose. With a blow of his own making, Cell knocked himself out. He was left staring at a glass of water on the table. Molly raised the mirrored plate inside her veil. You did it, breathed Rocky, hardly able to believe what he was seeing. To Molly's left, 3 other guests and their translator looked concerningly at the president-elect. Sinclair quickly dealt with him. Now everyone in the room sat staring glassy-eyed at Cell, who continued to gaze blankly at the tumbler of water in front of him. Sinclair edged towards Cell, fascinated, as if he was observing a sleeping tiger. It worked, he said, astounded. I've always wanted to see Primo hypnotized, and you've done it. He did it to himself, really, said Molly, pulling the hot veil, the niqab, and the mirrored contraption from her head, and it was Rocky's brilliant idea and Forrest's expert craftsmanship. She looked at Cell with satisfaction, but we'd better not waste time. He might come around. Molly and Rocky kicked off their platform shoes, and Rocky thankfully peeled off his nose and his headwear. Sinclair threw them a knapsack with their sneakers in it. Then he quickly programmed the translators so they could make up stories to tell the foreign business people, giving everyone a clear idea about what had happened over lunch. He told them that Primo had left for a long weekend in the mountains and that they would all come out of their trances in an hour. Molly approached Primo. I'm gonna get his crystal, she said, pulling up a chair to stand on. Primo stood, immobile as waxwork, but unlike a man-made sculpture, he was breathing. Molly carefully unclipped the platinum chain and pulled the whole necklace from out of his shirt and placed it around her own neck. It felt very at home there. Okay, time to stop the world, she said, putting her hand on Rocky's shoulder. Are you ready? He nodded. Then, concentrating on a cut glass water pitcher, Molly rapidly breathed the cold fusion feeling into herself, and like a practiced professional, she effortlessly stopped time. Instantly, everyone around the table, including Sel, became as still as doorstops. Sinclair smiled. All those times Primo's done this to other people, I bet he never expected it would happen to him. I hope I can do this without releasing him from the freeze. He tipped Sel backwards and caught him under his arms. Oof, he weighs a ton. With difficulty, he began to drag him out of the dining room, concentrating hard on not transmitting any cold fusion down his arms into Sel so he would stay frozen. It was very difficult. You okay, Molly? Think you can keep it up till we get out of here? Molly nodded. As far as she could see, Sinclair was the one who might have problems. Sinclair heaved the president-elect through the marble hall. As he thudded up the oak stairs like a dressmaker's dummy, his suede loafer came off. Molly, keeping a firm grip on Rocky, picked it up. She looked up to the top floors of the house and imagined Davina Nattel sitting by herself somewhere there. They couldn't reassure her now. They didn't have time. But if all went according to plan, Davina would soon be free. Sinclair dragged Sal across the courtyard, where a solid flame hung over the giant egg. They reached the Aston Martin, and Sinclair struggled to manhandle Sal into the back seat. Molly and Rocky climbed in next. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Sinclair jumped quickly into the front and, with a screech, accelerated around the bend of the gravel drive. Minutes later, they were tearing along Sunset Strip, weaving through the frozen traffic. Where there was a jam, they drove on the hard shoulder or on the sidewalk and shot straight through any red lights. Molly was beginning to shiver with effort of holding time still. Suddenly, Sinclair pulled over and stopped the car. Molly released the time stop, and the cars on the street were in full motion again. Primo Sel grunted, but remained in trance. Was it my imagination, or did you feel that too? Sinclair said quietly. What? Said Rocky. An earth tremor? Molly looked nervously out of the window. It came from the sky. It was a way off, but it felt like it was coming closer, Sinclair agreed. I didn't feel anything, said Rocky. Someone was resisting the freeze, explained Molly. Aliens? Molly felt herself paling. Never in her life had she considered that aliens might really exist, but these days she'd learned that anything was possible. Molly, Rocky, and Sinclair sat on the large, white banquette under the huge picture window in Sinclair's living room. They felt weary, but at the same time, an excited satisfaction thrilled them all. Sinclair could hardly contain his delight. This is just so cool, he said again, a phrase he'd been repeating ever since they'd finally gotten Sel up the elevator and into his house. The truth was that as well as being pleased, Sinclair was shocked. Seeing Primo, the man who'd dominated his life, now reduced to an empty shell, was more shocking than he realized it would be. Sel sat in a high-backed chair, completely and deeply hypnotized, looking as if he had swallowed a gallon of wet concrete. Petula sniffed at his legs. What shall we do now? Asked Rocky quietly. We must take away his desire to be president, whispered Sinclair. We must put an end to all his ambitions to be powerful, stop him from wanting to control the world, from wanting endless wealth. Obviously, we must stop him from knowing how to hypnotize people, said Molly. Yes, agreed Sinclair. And then we should do a locked-in hypnosis with a password, so he's stuck like that for good. Molly shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. She had never liked the idea of anyone being programmed to think a certain way forever. We don't have to. I mean, we never did a forever hypnosis on Nachman. Just look at how much better he is. Can't we make Sel improve himself? Sel isn't a small fry like Nachman, Molly. His brain isn't normal. We can't risk it. I suppose not, Molly said reluctantly. The most important thing, Rocky reminded them, is to release all his victims. We must find out where they all are and what his passwords have been so we can dehypnotize them. Back from adulting. They've hypnotized Primo Sel. They succeeded. Okay, said Molly. Let's do it. Molly faced the man who, until a short while ago, programming I know, had been one of the most powerful people on the planet. They hypnotized him with his own eyes. She had a mirror, and he hypnotized himself. Primo Cell, you will now answer all my questions, she told him. Where is Lucy Logan? Is she safe? Is she alive? Lucy is in California. She is staying in the Beverly Hills Hotel. Wow, said Sinclair, so he's got her nearby to work for him when he needs her. That's incredible, said Molly, but thank goodness for that. We can get to her sooner and dehypnotize her. Then, with the burning question of Lucy off her shoulders, Molly dared ask a darker one. So, Primo Cell, how many people have you actually hypnotized? 3,000, said Cell, as easily as if he were telling her how many people he'd beaten playing table tennis. Molly reeled back in horror. She managed to ask, Don't you feel sorry for what you've done? Sinclair sighed. Molly, I've told you, he's insane. Of course he won't. Sorry? Cell hesitated. A part of me, somewhere, deep down does, but I don't have access to that feeling. Davina Nattel helped me contact my feelings, but otherwise, there's a wall. A wall? Said Molly. A forbiddance. A what? I am forbidden to go to my feelings. Molly frowned. Rocky and Sinclair sat up. Like a miner of information, Molly had unwittingly chanced upon an unexpected vein of truth. Are you saying, Primo, that someone has forbidden you to go to your feelings? She asked slowly. Yes. Who has forbidden you? Molly felt the hairs on the back of her neck prickle with a strange, horrible excitement. My master, said Cell. Your master? Who is your master? Primo Cell shuddered as if he were trying to summon up the name, but couldn't. Sinclair and Rocky leaned closer, eyes wide. Say it, insisted Molly. Primo began to shake his head as if he was trying to dislodge an earwig from his ear. The answer's imprisoned, he said. Molly took Primo's hand and stared at her shoes. Sinclair, she said, help Rocky so he doesn't freeze. As easily as pressing a button on a film projector, Molly stopped the world. Now, she said to Cell, you will forget all instructions you have received to keep anything secret. No secrets now. Who is your master? Cell began to froth at the mouth as he strained to speak the name. Slack-clegg, he spluttered. Slack-clack. It was as if the name was locked in his voice box and couldn't come out. Slug. Petula, still as a stuffed dog, stared up at him. There's a password, said Sinclair, astonished. The name's been locked in with a password. There must be some way to find out the password, Molly said. She spoke to Cell. What is the password that has been used to lock in your instructions? I cannot tell you that, said Cell. We're just going to have to guess, said Sinclair. But that might take 1,000,000 years, said Molly. I mean, there are trillions of possibilities. Make the world move again, Sinclair said nervously. I can feel that resistance feeling again, and it's getting closer. He looked out of the window at the horizon, from where that strange electric tingling feeling was once more coming. Molly nodded and she released the time freeze. The water in the lap pool began to flow, and outside she heard Forrest's deep voice as he sang to his chickens. Whoever it is out there, continued Sinclair, controls Cell, and they must be looking for him now. His expression was fearful. If they get here, if there's more than one of them, we're in real trouble. They'll want their president-elect back. Molly's mind whirled. For all they knew, Primo Cell's master or masters might be about to break down the door. She grabbed a pen and paper from the coffee table and urgently turned to Cell. Okay, Primo, I want you to quickly tell me all the passwords that you've used on other hypnotists, on the stars, on all the people you have hypnotized, so that we can release them. There has only ever been one password that I've used, Cell hissed. So what is it? Molly lowered her pen. The air was thick with anticipation as everyone waited, hardly breathing. The password I use is perfectly punctually. Molly felt as if she'd been punched in the brain. Perfectly punched. Perfectly punctually? But that's... She couldn't speak. Those words. Those two unusually joined words had been used on her, used to wake Molly the first time she had ever been hypnotized, used by a person whom Molly trusted. And those very same words were the ones that Primo Cell used to control his victims. Those weren't Cell's words. They were someone else's. Molly's brain suddenly added 2 and 2 and 2. Was perfectly punctually also the password that had been used to keep Cell under control? Without warning, Molly grabbed Rocky and Cell's hands and froze the world again. I order you to tell me who your master is, Molly shouted at Primo, perfectly punctually. Molly's guess had been a bullseye. This was not only the password that Cell used, but it was also the one that had been used on him. At once, Primo melted with obedience, and he said, quite simply, Logan is my master. Rocky's mouth opened so wide someone could have pushed a large wedge of cheese into it. Sinclair looked as if he'd swallowed a live eel. Petula looked as if she was growling too. You mean Lucy Logan is your master? Said Molly, trying to absorb this ghastly fact. Lucy Logan is my master, confirmed Cell. Almost everything I do is because Lucy has ordered it so. Molly felt the resistance to the time freeze again, closer than it had been before. Immediately, she let the cold fusion feeling drain, and outside, a helicopter that had been held mid-flight continued on its way. So Lucy Logan was the enemy. Lucy Logan, the quiet, sweet librarian whom they all thought Cell had hypnotized, had actually, all along, been the master of Cell. And if Sinclair was right, it was Lucy Logan who was creeping through the stopped world, searching for her prize automaton, and getting closer every minute. Molly was overcome with shock. That Lucy was the enemy was almost impossible to comprehend. It was the sourest, most hurtful discovery. She thought Lucy was her friend. Everyone felt horribly jumpy. They didn't know what to do. Should they take Primo and make a run for it before Lucy reached the house? But where would they go? They couldn't risk a hypnotized president-elect being spotted. Molly could practically hear the sirens blaring if they were caught. But maybe the librarian wasn't headed toward the Hollywood Hills at all. Maybe she was still completely oblivious to the fact that Primo Cell had been taken. What they did all know was that their best chance of safety lay in finding out as much as they could from Cell. How do you know Lucy Logan? Asked Sinclair. We met at college. Molly was frantically running a series of impossible thoughts through her head. Had Lucy invented the Magpie Killer? Had Lucy planned that Molly and Rocky would be killed by it? Surely not. Lucy had wanted to stop Primo Cell's plans, hadn't she? And where is Lucy Logan from? Molly asked, hoping madly that there might be two Lucy Logans. Lucy is from Briarsville. Molly's head felt as if it was about to explode. This didn't make sense. Why would Lucy send me to destroy Primo Cell if she was behind all his actions? Molly asked Rocky and Sinclair. She was the one who made sure I found the hypnotism book and learned how to hypnotize people in the first place. Why would she have bothered letting me find the book if she planned to get rid of me? Molly turned to Cell. Do you know why Lucy sent me? The hypnotized Cell took a while to think about this. Then he speculated. It may have been because of the suspicious circumstances around Davina Nattel. You see, I could not hypnotize Davina, and this was out of the ordinary. It was the first time I had ever failed. Perhaps Lucy was suspicious of me then. Perhaps she worried that her hypnosis over me was wearing off. Was it? No. Then why couldn't you hypnotize Davina? Asked Molly. There was something haunting about her age. Something that reminded me of something I had forgotten. I felt almost as if I loved her, like a daughter. My power was displaced by her. I couldn't hypnotize her, and once she knew about me, I couldn't have her telling people about me, so she had to be abducted. All this I did without Lucy Logan's orders. Perhaps Lucy sent you to check that I wasn't doing other things without her orders too. When did you last see Lucy Logan? 11.5 years ago. This was amazing. 11.5 years ago was before Molly was born. Sorry, she's 11, not 12. You mean she never even came to America to see you? She stayed in Briarsville all that time? She never came to see me. She traveled to many other parts of the world. How did she control you? She spoke to me every week. And when did you last speak to her? Asked Molly. In June, just before I announced that I was running for president. But that was 5 months ago. Why would she talk to him every week for 11 years and then just stop talking to him in June? Do you know the answers to these questions? Primocell shrugged. Perhaps she felt that by June I could be trusted and all was safely in place for the election campaign, so she felt she could leave me to it. So once you were president, what was Lucy's plan then? Molly asked. Her plan was to become First Lady. First Lady? What's that? That's the title given to the president's wife, said Sinclair, letting out a whistle of amazement. My wife, said Primo blankly. She planned to meet me soon. We were to meet at a Books Build Brilliance charity event, and there we were to fall in love. The idea of a romantic president was one that she thought would make me even more popular with the American people. This was such a staggering notion that Molly, Rocky, and Sinclair all sat for a moment, looking like their brains had been replaced with molasses. She's brilliant, said Sinclair in admiration. All those years ago, she hypnotized Primo to do her dirty work, to get rid of any rival hypnotist who might be a threat to her ambitions. Except for you and Sally, Rocky pointed out. Well, mused Sinclair, she must have wanted him to have some trained, tame hypnotist on her side. He fell glumly silent. Poor Sinclair, Molly thought. The thought of how his life had been hijacked for one woman's selfish plan must be horrible. And then, Rocky continued, she got Primo to get rich for her. He became so rich he could spend millions more dollars than anyone else on his election campaign, and win, added Sinclair. Because, said Molly, she wants to be the president's wife. She must have reckoned that by the time Primo was president, he'd be so rich and powerful that it would be safe for her to step in. As First Lady, she could travel with him everywhere. She'd be right beside him, breathing down his ear and whispering to him like a snake. It's not Primo who wants to take over the world. It's her. Molly shook her head determinedly, as if to help it digest all the confusing facts that had suddenly piled up there. All along, she said incredulously, Lucy Logan was using me, and in the end she wanted me dead, and... Molly stuck her tongue out in repugnance. When I went to visit her in her cottage, everything she told me was lies. Her car crash, her plastered leg, her burned face, she made it all up to persuade me to help her. Molly remembered that extraordinary Sunday afternoon. She thought about the room full of clocks, the secret locked room with the bonsai trees on the table, and the horrible silk shoes in the glass-fronted case, the shoes worn by Chinese girls who'd had their feet bound. They all went with Lucy Logan. She was a mind-binder. Molly thought of the meticulously kept topiary hedges. Now, instead of imagining Lucy as a sweet person tending to her garden, Molly saw her as an insane control freak, slicing away at her hedges to keep them under control and never let them be their own natural wild selves. Molly remembered the big bird bush. Had it been a magpie? Did it stand for Primocell? And the other bushy animals, did they each stand for a person under Lucy's power? Then a horrendous thought struck Molly. Was she herself under Lucy Logan's power? Was she the Bush baby? Do you think I'm hypnotized by Lucy? She asked Rocky and Sinclair. No, I know you're not, said Sinclair. I would have found out at Dune Beach if you were, but it's amazing that you're not. It is, isn't it? Agreed Molly. I wonder why not. Just count your lucky stars, but Sinclair was suddenly aware of how little time they might have. We'll think about that later, Molly. Right now, we'd better concentrate on getting Cell deprogrammed. This operation took a while, as they had to make quite sure there wasn't any extra instructions stowed away in him behind different passwords. There weren't. Everything was locked by the perfectly punctually password. It was amazing how much of Primo's life had been controlled. Molly began to feel sorry for him, and wondered how he had fallen into Lucy Logan's web. But why did Lucy Logan choose you? She asked. Because she loved me once, said Primo. At the university, she taught me everything I know about hypnotism. She gave me my crystal. She had great plans to stop the world and to stop suffering, to bring peace to the planet. We were happy once. What happened? When did she start to go crazy? After she had our baby, said Primo. Lucy Logan had a baby? Molly said. The idea of the murderous new Logan as a mother didn't fit in at all. Molly hadn't seen anything in her house that suggested she had a child. There weren't any toys or photographs. Poor kid. What a mother to have, said Rocky. Has her child grown up and left home? Our baby never lived at Lucy's house, said Primo. Lucy took the child to an orphanage. I never saw my baby. Lucy made sure of that. How horrible of her, said Molly. But which orphanage did she take her to? One in another town? Molly's mind had already sieved through every child whom she knew at the orphanage in Briarsville. If the child was 13, then might have been Cynthia, but Cynthia was a twin. Hardwick House, said Primo Cell. Hardwick House? That was the name of the orphanage before Molly changed it to Happiness House. Did she have twins? Molly asked. No, Lucy had one child, one baby girl. Molly thought it couldn't be Hazel. She had arrived when she was 6. Molly's heart suddenly throbbed in a thick, achy way, and she suddenly had this strange feeling that she was awake in a dream. The child would be 11 and a half now, Primo Cell steamrolled on. Molly felt imaginary arrows pivot all around her. Mentally she tried to dodge them, but however hard she tried, she couldn't get out of the firing line. The truth had arrived, and as suddenly and as surprisingly as an exploding bolt of lightning. Was she delivered in a Molly couldn't say it. She breathed in and tried again. In a marshmallow box? Maybe, said Primo matter-of-factly. Lucy was very fond of marshmallows, especially when she was pregnant. She ate boxfuls. Moon's marshmallows? Molly didn't want to believe her ears. Yes, they were her favorite brand, said Primo Cell with absolutely no emotion in his voice. No, it can't be true. Molly looked away. Inside her head, 2 voices began to vie for dominance. Don't be an idiot. It's not true. One boomed angrily. Why trust this man? It's not true. Don't be stupid, the other voice yelled. What more evidence do you need? The truth is staring you in the face. Molly put her hands up to her head to stop the deafening noise. Rocky put his hand on her arm. You found your parents, he said quietly. Molly gripped his hand. But I don't believe it. I don't want to believe it, she said, appalled. Molly felt totally cheated. Like a person who had been asking for a certain special thing all her life, and it had suddenly been given to her, but on opening it, she discovered it was wrong. Molly didn't like her present. Yet she couldn't return it. It was a one-way, you'll just have to live with it present. Look who they are, Rocky. I didn't want to find my parents here, now, like this. I don't want them as my parents. You've always been looking, Molly, Rocky reminded her. We both have. You're lucky. Now you know who your parents are. But my mother is a maniac, Molly cried. I don't want her. Primo stared blankly into space. I'm not going to tell him I'm his daughter. I don't want to, said Molly, shuddering at the idea. She clutched Rocky's sleeve, and I especially don't ever want to meet her again. You don't have to tell him who you are, said Rocky. You can bring him out of his trance now, and he'll never know. But Molly, it's probably the greatest sadness of his life that he never met you. Remember, he was only hypnotized not to care. Then he added, do you remember what he said about Davina? He said there was something about her that helped him feel things, even though he was forbidden to feel. He said it was something about her age, that reminded him of something he'd forgotten. I felt almost as if I loved her like a daughter. My power was displaced by her. Do you remember him saying that? Even though Lucy Logan hypnotized Primo to forget you, Davina reminded him of you. Do you see that, Molly? He never completely forgot you. Molly nodded, but she was too upset to speak. She picked up a tool and left the room to think. For the next half hour, Rocky and Sinclair finished deprogramming Cell. They told him that he now had access to all his feelings, that he was completely out of Lucy Logan's grasp, that he was free. Rocky left Primo with all his knowledge of hypnotism, and then they took him to Sinclair's bedroom and told him to sleep. Sinclair looked at the prone body of Primo collapsed on the circular bed. He's dog-tired because of what's happened to him, he observed. He probably feels like sleeping for a century. We must let him rest for as long as possible. so that when he wakes, his mind has properly absorbed the deprogramming. And Rocky, as far as the rest of the country goes, Primo Stell is still the president-elect. We must keep him hidden here, because if Lucy Logan was to get to him before he announced that he was not going to be president, she'd still have a chance of carrying out her plans. We'll lock him in my room for safety. When he's conscious again and his head is clear, we'll get him down to Iceberg Studio so he can declare on TV that he no longer wants to be president. As soon as we've done that, Logan's lost. So they closed the door on Sel and turned the key. Rocky felt sorry for the man. When he woke, he'd have to come to terms with the fact that Lucy Logan had stolen 11 years of his life and used them for herself. Molly reeled from the succession of shocks that had battered her. That Lucy had betrayed her, that Lucy was behind Primo Stell, was bad enough shock. The fact that Lucy was her mother, a mother who had wanted her dead, and that Primo was her father, was such a shock of high voltage that Molly wasn't quite sure how to cope. Rocky couldn't help her. She needed to be alone. She went upstairs to sit in the sunlight on the roof of Sinclair's house. What a fucking revelation to have. Hang on. Molly spent the next few hours with Petula, sitting quietly on the warm sun deck on the top of Sinclair's house. She did her best to come to terms with her mammoth discoveries. She tried to breathe deeply and calmly. She shut her eyes and drifted off, just as Forrest had taught her, and in her imagination she looked down on herself. In her mind, as she floated far above Los Angeles, a thick red line connected her to Primo Stell, and another glowing red line joined her to Lucy Logan, wherever she was. Molly realized that these lines had always been there, but she hadn't seen them before. Molly hated the line that joined her to Logan, but no amount of wishing could make the line go away. Molly was connected to her, whether she liked it or not. That ruthless, evil woman was her mother. To make herself feel better, Molly imagined special golden lines connecting her to the people whom she knew and loved best. Rocky, Miss Trinkleberry, Gemma and Jerry, and little Ruby and Jinx. Molly sent silver lines, bronze lines, green, purple, and blue lines swooping away from her. They helped blot out the horrible red one that shot toward Lucy Logan. Lucy Logan. Molly hated her very name. When Logan found out that her plans had been foiled, she would definitely try to pull everything back on track. She'd try to make Primo her puppet again. She'd try to hypnotize him. She'd try to hypnotize all of them. Molly dreaded to think how strong her hypnotic powers were. Molly let herself fly all the way up into space until she was aware of her body as a microscopic cell on the surface of the earth. It was as if her mind was drifting, looking down at the spot where her body, her Molly Moon body, was. From her lofty vantage, she imagined where Logan's body might be. She shut her eyes and concentrated hard, but at the same time she let her mind relax. Molly looked down across to the hazy San Gabriel Mountains, but she had no sense of Logan being there. Molly looked southwest to Santa Monica Beach, but her instinct told her that Logan wasn't there either. Now she swiveled her mind's eye directly below her to Hollywood. She felt a kind of radar-like certainty that Logan was there, and, as if turning the lens on a telescope, Molly focused her imagination. She zoomed in on the place where she could picture Logan. Her mind became brighter. Sunlight and a bird's-eye view of green trees filled it. Then, her mental vision conjured up a view of the top of Logan's head. Molly breathed in and let the strange apparition expand. She saw Logan walking up a path flanked by geranium bushes and pepper trees. All at once, Molly knew that she had imagined the path to Sinclair's house, and in the next moment, as she opened her eyes, she realized that the vision in her head was not imaginary, but true. The front doorbell rang. Molly could hear Sinclair's voice answering the intercom. "Hello?" "Sinclair," came a woman's deep voice. "Sinclair, I wonder whether you might come downstairs. I'm an old friend of your father's, and I'd like to get in touch with him. My name's Lucy Logan." Molly sat up as if she'd been stung and put her hand around Petula's mouth in case she should bark. "I'm sorry," she heard Sinclair reply, "but if you'd like to get in touch with Primo Stell, I suggest you make an appointment with the secretary. But Sinclair, I have to speak. The intercom clunked as it disconnected. Molly heard a frustrated sigh from below. Lucy had been left on the doorstep. Molly craned her neck and heard crunching steps walking away from the house. As soon as she thought there was no risk of being seen, she scuttled through the hatch of the sun deck and bolted it behind her, and she and Petula sped down the steep stairs into the safety of the house. At the bottom, they bumped straight into Sinclair and Rocky. Molly jumped. Molly, I know, bad news. She's here. I heard her. She must know Primo's here, said Sinclair in a panic, pacing forward and backward on the spot. Molly had never seen him look so scared. Did you see where she went? It sounded like she was setting off through the garden. Is Primo's bedroom locked? Asked Sinclair. Rocky tapped his pocket. You locked it yourself. I've locked the back door, too. There's no way she can get in. You two had better keep away from the windows. Maybe we should wake Primo up and get him out of here right now, said Molly. Far too risky, Sinclair replied instantly. He'll still be semi-conscious. We might damage the deprogramming. Anyway, who knows what we might meet on the road. Sinclair started rubbing his fingers together, as if he was fiddling with a piece of invisible putty. The minutes passed. They stayed where they were, outside the entrance to the sitting room, all fighting the fear that was crawling up their spines. Do you think she's got other people out there? Asked Molly, chewing her sleeve. I mean, she may have a small army, ready to ambush us. All at once, Molly and Sinclair felt a coolness on the surface of their skins beneath their crystals, and a chill flickered through their bodies. Molly grabbed Rocky, and, as the world froze, she helped him resist it. Outside, the traffic on the road in the valley ceased. The water in the fountain that fed Sinclair's lap pool stopped in mid-flow. Petula was still. Everywhere was silence. What's she up to? Rocky said. The feeling's coming from over there. Molly stepped into the sitting room with Rocky and pointed to where the trees hid the road further down the hill. I think we've got to grab Primo and leave now, said Rocky. If she's on the far side of the house, we can get him into the car without being seen. Probably. Maybe we should risk it, Sinclair agreed. Just as suddenly, the world started moving again. Whatever it was that she needed to stop time for, she's done it now, said Molly. I'm not sure we should leave. I mean, she doesn't know Primo's here. She doesn't know Rocky and I are here. She thinks we're dead. If we leave now, we might come face to face with her or some cop she's hypnotized. She'd have Primo taken from us, and who knows what she'll do with us. We have more of a chance if we wait for her to come to the door. Here we have the advantage of surprise. I can use my eyes on her. They all perched uncomfortably at the back of the room on some star-shaped wire mesh chairs that weren't really designed to be sat on. Everyone expected the doorbell to ring again at any moment. Rocky picked at a hole in his jeans, making it twice as big. Sinclair scrolled through numbers on his cell phone as if looking at them would give him the answer as to what he should do next. Molly stared at the narrow channel of water that ran along the side of the huge room to the fountain where it was filled. The constant fountain splashed quietly, but did nothing to diffuse the tension. Ripples from the opposite direction met the fountain's flow and made the water swish against the edges of the lap pool. Molly's eyes followed the channel as it curved toward the window, and she realized, with a nauseating lurch, that there was an entry to the house they had all overlooked. Then she saw, to her horror, where the ripples were coming from. Someone was swimming in the lap pool. Like a duck in the fairgrounds shooting gallery, Lucy Logan's head was forging its way through the water toward them. Slowly, the head started to rise, and like a killing water beast, Lucy Logan rose, dripping from the water, a silver pistol clenched between her teeth. She no longer wore the bandages and the plaster cast that had covered her in Briarsville. Petula began to bark and bark. Lucy fixed Sinclair, Molly, and Rocky with a cold, petrifying glare. She looked very unlike the Briarsville librarian whom Molly had known. She was still dressed in a tweed skirt and a sensible cardigan. These were now sopping wet, and her blonde hair was styled, as it had always been, into a bun on the top of her head, but she looked disturbingly different. Her eyes had lost all their kindness. Her nose looked more hooked. "Don't look at her eyes," gasped Sinclair. No one needed to be reminded. Molly had already fixed her eyes on the gun, now in Lucy Logan's hand. "And don't listen to her." "But she's got a gun," Molly said, as if no one else had noticed it. And it's loaded, said Lucy, as calmly as if she was about to start a guided tour of the house. She pointed the pistol at Petula. Stop that dog barking or I'll shoot it. Molly snatched up Petula and silenced her, instinctively stepping away from Lucy. Sinclair and Rocky moved with her. Where is he? Logan asked, raising her weapon. You might as well let me have him, or I'll kill you and find him anyway. You'll kill us whatever happens, said Sinclair. Molly gulped. The idea of a bullet, a hard, steel bullet, puncturing her body at lightning speed, was terrifying. But mixed with this fear was the thought that tantalized her. The mad woman standing in front of her was her mother. Logan raised the gun. If you shoot, then you'll never find out where Cell is, Molly lied. We've deprogrammed him, and he's somewhere so safe that even you won't be able to find him. Lucy Logan lowered the revolver. She glanced toward the kitchen and the other door that led off the room, Sinclair's bedroom. She walked toward it, keeping her gun aimed at everyone. She tried the door handle, which held fast. Loudly, but as nicely as if she was about to tell him his lunch was ready, she called, Primo? What is it? Came Primo's groggy reply. Logan smiled slyly. No doubt one of you has the key, she said politely. Molly stared at her. It was amazing how now, because she hated her, Lucy seemed far uglier than she had remembered her. He's deprogrammed, said Molly. You won't ever have power over him again. You underestimate my influence, said Lucy coolly, just as I underestimated your luck. You thought the magpie killed me and Rocky ages ago, didn't you? Said Molly. Yes. I should have taken the precaution of leaving some hypnotic instruction in you, just in case you did survive. You never could have hypnotized me that day in your cottage. I was too alert, said Molly defiantly. Oh, I could have, if I'd tried, said Lucy. I should have. It would have been a lot less tiresome now if you were still under my thumb. But the chances of a specimen like you surviving Cell were so slim. Petula growled. Slim in your eyes, but your microscope's obviously broken, said Molly. Logan ignored her and pointed her gun at Sinclair. And I suppose you had something to do with their escape. I remember seeing pictures of you, Sinclair, when you were a ragged little circus boy. Primo and I were wrong about you. I thought you had potential. I thought you were trustworthy. And you, she said, looking at Rocky. Perhaps you were more talented than I realized. Lucy's hard blue eyes scanned them all contemptuously. You do realize that I have to dispose of you all, one way or another. So which is it to be? My eyes or the bullet? It's your decision. No one spoke. Patience certainly wasn't one of her virtues, for, fed up with no answer, Logan said abruptly, Actually, I'm sick of the lot of you. I'm going to shoot you all. Goodbye. She pointed her gun at Rocky. Molly saw Lucy's finger moving to squeeze the revolver's trigger. In that same instant, she realized that this was no game. Lucy Logan was about to shoot Rocky. With a speed that Molly didn't know she had, she drew the cold fusion feeling from the air itself and instantaneously stopped the world. In that slice of time, the first nanosecond of a loud bang hit her ears. Everything stood still, except for Logan, Molly, Petula, and Sinclair. A bullet 3 inches from Rocky's throat hung like a frozen missile in the air. Logan smiled and pointed her gun at Molly. Good timing, she said. Try to stop this one. Molly was confused. She was already holding the world still. Could she stop it again? She watched Lucy's wrist, trying to sense when she would squeeze the trigger again. Sinclair dived behind a chair. Molly saw the tendon on Lucy's thick wrist raise slightly, and she chose her moment. Again, time stopped. Molly had judged it perfectly. This time, a bullet hung in the air midway between her and Lucy. This bullet was on its way to Molly's chest. Commented Lucy. That one would have hit you in the heart. Molly couldn't give in to her numbing fear. She had to remain lucid, or she would be dead. She hadn't known until now that time could be stopped on top of already frozen time. She looked at Sinclair to see his reaction, but now he was a statue too, like Rocky. Molly quickly put Petula down behind the sofa, where she also went rigid. Molly wondered how many times she would be able to stop the world, but there wasn't long to wonder, because Lucy was about to kill her. She fired her third bullet. Again, Molly froze time. For a moment, Logan and Molly were both distracted as they resisted the freeze. Logan took a moment to adjust to the new time. Then she snarled, "You're waning, Moon." She fired again. A fourth bullet. A fifth bullet. Terror swept through Molly as Logan pointed the gun at her head, at her heart, at her stomach. Molly trembled as she stopped the world for the 8th time. She was almost too late. A bullet hung suspended in the air, an inch from her forehead. Molly threw herself behind the sofa. "You've only got a few more bullets," she shouted through the icy fog that was beginning to rise from the water and fill the room. "You've been watching too many films. I've just reloaded," said Logan. Molly glanced around the side of her hiding place. Logan saw her and another shot rang out. The sound cut off instantly as Molly froze everything once more. Molly shivered. Logan shivered. The room was starting to feel very, very cold. "You're a coward," said Molly, panting. "This would only be fair if I had a gun too." "I'm not a coward," said Logan. "I just like to have an unfair advantage, that's all. After all, I have to win, Molly." Logan frowned. She really didn't want to play cat and mouse with this girl. She wanted this business over. All this time stopping was very tiring. She had never suspected that Molly might be this good. To stop the world over and over required extreme focus of mind. Logan had never thought a child would be able to do it. But she also knew that, like folding a piece of paper over and over again, eventually folding time would become impossible. Logan knew that, in the end, Molly would have no way to dodge her bullets. So, although Logan's strength was being tested to the fullest, she also knew that she would win. She raised her gun. Molly's teeth were chattering. Each time she forced the cold fusion feeling outward, it was as if the world sucked the heat out of her body. Now the icy mist was shrouding everything in the room. Lucy Logan's body was just visible, but Molly could barely detect the movement of her finger against the trigger of the gun. She was sensing as much as seeing when Logan was about to fire. Lucy Logan's vision was becoming blurred too. Her hearing was fuzzy. It was as if she was in a cold airplane at a very high altitude. She fired at Molly, but, on stumbling toward her, she found that the shape she'd shot at was a coat on a chair and not Molly at all. She saw an indistinct figure move to her left. The world froze again. Froze this time before Logan had fired. As Logan resisted it, her legs went numb with cold. She grabbed at something to steady herself. They must be nearing the impossible fold now. If she was weakening, the child must surely be about to collapse. Lucy had the advantage. She had trained her mind for years. She would win this contest. She knew she would. She felt for her crystal under her wet cardigan, colder than ice. With great effort, she spoke. "So, Molly, orphan Molly, how would you feel if I told you that I know who your mother and father are?" From behind a chair near the window, Molly replied, "I'd say the news was out of date. You're too late, Logan. I know. I know that you are my mother, and I know that Sel is my father, and don't worry, I've already disowned you." Molly was fighting for her life. Her backbone felt cold as an icicle, as if it might snap. The chill of the crystal against her neck bored into her skin, as if it was freezing her very soul. Molly thought how much she hated Lucy Logan. She couldn't believe a person could be so crazy, so bad. But what made it all 1,000 times worse was that the foul human being brandishing the pistol was Molly's flesh and blood. All Molly's life she'd wanted to know who her mother was. She'd dreamed of a kind, intelligent, funny person. This is Molly Moon Stops the World. It is the second book in the series. The reality was this megalomaniac killer. Molly hated her for ruining her dreams. She would not let Logan end her life too. But she was so cold. So very cold. And so tired. Molly shut her eyes. Behind the lids, she saw herself in the room with Lucy. Then, as was so natural to her, she imagined herself shooting away from her body like a rocket into space. In a millisecond, she was there. What are you saying beta male for? And to who? Okay, anyway. This time, space was different. Molly saw the whole world, still below her. She saw the planets around her stopped in their orbits. The stars in the solar systems halted for a moment in time. Molly sensed space around her, stretching forever, for an eternity. In this frozen vastness, she felt herself tinier than tiny, like a speck of dust, smaller than that. She felt herself so small that she was practically nothing. She had found inside herself that Nanu was small. And yet, Molly's feelings of smallness switched. Suddenly, Molly was impressed by how big she was. Because of her, the universe was held up. Because of her, all the elements, earth, fire, air, and water, were stilled. Molly felt small, then very, very big, and again, Nanu small and gigantically big. Molly felt completely at one with the universe, and an enormous feeling of love for everything in it filled her. Then she sensed far, far below her, Lucy Logan's movement on the world. Then the world seemed to make an offering to Molly. An idea. The idea of the North Pole. Ice, she realized, didn't feel cold. If she zoned into the essence of ice, perhaps then she too wouldn't feel cold anymore. She let her mind relax and let her body relax into the ice. And suddenly, Molly didn't feel cold at all. The crystal around her neck felt warm. Molly knew that she could stop time again. With her eyes shut, and as easily as if she was blowing out a candle, Molly stopped time for the 18th time. Now, with every breath she took, she drew time to a standstill. For the 19th time, breathe out, breathe in. For the 20th time, breathe out, breathe in. For the 21st time. Molly felt no more resistance. Molly was the only moving thing in the universe. Life everywhere was still. Molly felt as alone as if she was dead. Except she wasn't dead. She was alive. For a moment she wondered whether she was alone. Was she the only conscious creature in the realms of space and time? Molly felt that although everywhere was still, the essence of life, the force inside and outside her, was watching her. And the mysterious force seemed to be thanking her. Molly opened her eyes. Now, instead of being misty and cold, the room was full of color. It was clear and still, and Lucy Logan was frozen with a look of hatred on her face. Molly walked around the room and carefully picked each frozen bullet from its hovering position. She threw all of them out the window. Then she took the gun out of Lucy Logan's hand and checked her clothes for any more weapons, and she took the crystal from Lucy's neck. Satisfied that her enemy was no longer armed, Molly brought her eyes up to their hypnotic peak. She positioned herself so that Logan's eyes were looking straight into hers. Then, touching her shoulder, she let movement flow into her again. If Lucy Logan had any energy left to combat Molly's, it was sapped in a second. Before she even became conscious of being alert, before she realized that she had frozen and started moving again, Molly's eyes had overpowered hers. Lucy Logan was hypnotized. "You are now completely under my power," said Molly. "Is that understood?" Lucy Logan nodded, and Molly looked at her face, trying to see whether there was any likeness between herself and this horrible creature. Logan's jaw was much heavier, and her face was much bonier than Molly had remembered. Her body was wiry. Molly hoped this wasn't how she would turn out when she grew up. "From now on," she declared, "you will accept that all the plans that you had before this meeting will never be carried out. You now have everything you need. You will not remember how to hypnotize anyone or anything. You will not remember how to stop the world. When you come out of this trance, you will behave as nicely as..." Molly tried to think of something that was always sweet-tempered. "As a lamb." Molly paused. The next step would be essential for someone as dangerous as Lucy Logan. And these instructions will be locked inside you forever by some words that you won't remember. These words will be... Molly glanced at the coffee table. "Moon's marshmallows." Then she added, "And when I clap my hands, you will wake up." Molly let go of Lucy's shoulder, and immediately the librarian froze again. At last, she stood still with her arms by her side, and she relaxed. She let the cold fusion feeling flow out of her fingertips, out of her body. The layers of freeze that she had forced onto time melted, until the time stop that had captured Rocky and Sinclair and Petula released them, and the whole world too. Molly collapsed on the sofa. Rocky and Sinclair took a second to register where everyone was. "It's okay," said Molly. "She didn't shoot any of us, and she's safe now." Logan smiled benignly at them all and said, "Bah, bah, bah." Rocky threw a cushion up in the air. "Whoa, Molly, you've done it." Molly laid her head on the back of the sofa. "Yep, I sure have. But wow, that was tiring." Sinclair picked up Logan's silver pistol from the table and examined it. Then he took it away to lock it in a cupboard. Rocky sat next to Molly and put his hand on her arm. "Thanks, Molly." Primo began to knock on the bedroom door. "Is that Lucy? What's going on out there?" "We can let him out now," said Molly. Rocky opened the door. "Is Lucy Logan here?" Primo said, stepping out. "Where is she?" He glanced at Lucy, then round the room. "Where?" Molly looked at the woman who had hypnotized Sel for all these years. Obviously, he hadn't seen her for so long that he didn't recognize her. "There she is," said Molly. "She's got older." "Don't be ridiculous," said Primo Sel. "This isn't Lucy. This person is an imposter." And marching over to her, he grabbed her by the arm. "Who are you? Where is the real Lucy Logan?" he demanded aggressively. In a lamb's voice, the person bad. "She's at Briarsville Park." Molly was stunned. She studied the woman in front of her, and suddenly it was completely clear that this wasn't the Lucy Logan Molly knew at all. This person bore a very strong resemblance to her, but her features were much rougher. Her nose was bigger. Her build was wirier. Molly had thought Lucy had looked uglier than the kind woman she had met in the library, but she hadn't questioned it. Now, as she scanned this face and body, it was obvious that they weren't Lucy's. And so this person was not her mother. "Is the real Lucy safe?" Molly asked. "Yes, she's locked up nice and safe." "And so who are you?" "I," said the person sweetly, and then, as if finding the words difficult to utter, stated, "I am Cornelius Logan." "Cornelius? But that's a man's name," Molly stammered. "Yes, that is true." The person's voice suddenly dropped to a low male tone. "Of course it is a ram's name. I am a ram." "A what?" asked Rocky, his eyebrows nearly shooting off his forehead. "You're kidding." Cornelius Logan nodded. "It's true, I am a ram," he said, and began to skip around the room as if telling everyone was a great relief to him. "Bah!" he bleated as he trotted past the panoramic window seat. Petula growled at him. "A man? But why?" "Because that's how I was when I was born," declared Cornelius Logan, cantering around the sofa. "Cornelius Logan," said Primo Sel. "I haven't heard that name in years." He turned to the others. "He's Lucy Logan's twin brother. That's why he looks like her. Like a badly drawn version of Lucy." Everyone stared at the strange creature who now pawed at the ground with an imaginary hoof. His Lucy Logan disguise, which for the last 20 minutes had convinced them, the hair in a bun, the sensible librarian's skirt, and the sweater set and pearls, was now starting to come apart. As he shook his head, his wig slipped sideways. Then, as he began galloping along the edge of the lap pool, he hitched up his wet skirt and everyone saw that the legs underneath were hairy and sinewy and not female legs at all. When he tore off his cardigan to reveal a short-sleeved sweater, he also uncovered his muscly arms. Molly's mind zoomed back to that afternoon in March, to Cornelius dressed as Lucy Logan in the Briarsville cottage. Suddenly, she saw how brilliantly this man had fooled her. The plaster cast on his leg and the bandages had been a clever distraction. Cornelius had known that children are taught not to stare at anyone with something wrong with them. And of course, Molly hadn't wanted to stare at his injured face. Instead, she looked at the pink nail-polished toenails sticking out of the end of his plaster cast, and she'd been duped. Molly thought hard. There must have been some clue. Suddenly she remembered how low Cornelius's voice had been that night she'd called him from the hotel. She'd caught him unawares. "Do you normally wear men's clothes?" she asked him. "Of course I do. Do you think I like dressing as a woman?" brayed Cornelius. "Do you think I liked putting on that stupid high voice?" He laughed with mad release. "Bah, bah, I had to become Lucy. I had to do it to get Molly Moon out here to investigate Sel." It was very necessary to investigate Cell, you see. He was behaving so oddly, not being able to hypnotize Davina, and then there was the kidnapping that I never authorized. And then, of course, I had to stay behind to weaken Lucy again. Cornelius pawed the ground. Again? What do you mean? The real Lucy Logan, explained Cornelius with a bleat. My sister Lucy was under my power for years. For 11.5 years, the same time as Cell. I had Cell and her under my power. It was genius. It was wonderful. I was planning to send Lucy out to marry him. She was going to be the president's wife, and I, Cornelius, would have controlled them both. Bah! At this point, Primo Cell sat down. He had turned a pale shade of olive green. I think I'm going to be sick, he said. And with that, he lurched towards Sinclair's bathroom. Poor man, said Rocky. This must all be a horrible shock for him, said Molly. Cornelius, oblivious of Cell's troubles, continued. All was going well, until Lucy met that Molly Moon in the library. Molly thought of their first ever meeting. What happened then? She demanded. Well, something that I had not counted on, brayed Cornelius. Even though I had hypnotized her to forget her daughter, even though I had done a permanent hypnosis on Lucy, when she met her daughter, Molly Moon, and she talked to her, the locked-in hypnosis, for some reason, started to unlock itself. Can you imagine? Molly felt a lump in her throat. As soon as she remembered the baby, because he's a lamb, said Cornelius, Lucy challenged me, which was foolish of her, as I, of course, was in a position to overpower her. She was always led by her heart. Such a stupid woman. She should have used her head. Hello. What did you do with her, and when was that? Asked Molly. I locked her in a room at Briarsville Park. That was the beginning of January. Ever since then, I've been trying to weaken her, and then hypnotize her again, so that my plans could be put back on track. Do you think I wanted to wear women's clothes forever? Cornelius laughed madly and ripped at his pearls. The string broke, and they flew all over the floor like spilled beans. I should never have let that Molly Moon find the hypnotism book. Why did you let her find it? Because I was impatient to see what her power as a hypnotist was. I put her in that orphanage all those years ago, so that she wouldn't grow up normally. I wanted her hard. I waited 11 years until, her powers would be starting to grow. Then I let her find the book. What a fool I was. She was too like her mother to ever be of use to me. And of course, she was more powerful than me. I was a twin, so my powers were diluted with my sister's, but Molly Moon's were concentrated. How blind I was. I never should have used her to check on Cell. I never thought her powers would be so strong, so soon. Violently, Cornelius began pulling at his sweater. I think you'd better give him something to wear, Molly said to Sinclair. He's so eager to get back to his real self that he'll have nothing on in a minute. Indeed, Cornelius Logan had already peeled off his sweater to reveal a strange bodysuit underneath. It was stuffed to make him look as if he had breasts. Incredible, said Rocky. He didn't half go to town on his disguise. He had to, said Sinclair, who by now was laughing with relief. Here, Cornelius, go into my room and help yourself to some of my clothes. There's a blue tracksuit hanging up in the wardrobe that will fit you. Cornelius made a beeline for Sinclair's bedroom. As he disappeared, Molly looked at Rocky, and both of them started to laugh. The sight of Cornelius charging round the room, taking his clothes off, had been very unexpected, and a bit shocking, but now it was so funny they couldn't stop giggling. After 5 minutes, they were still in stitches. It's not that funny, said Sinclair, but Molly and Rocky didn't even hear him. And when Cornelius came out dressed in a tracksuit, with his wig and makeup still on, and began to nibble at a potted fern by the TV set, they started laughing all over again. Finally, they got a grip on themselves. Phew, said Molly. I mean, for a while I thought that guy was my mother. Yeah, it was bad news, Rocky said. At least this way, he's only your uncle. And they began giggling again. Their hysteria was really their way of letting off a lot of steam. Ever since they'd arrived in Los Angeles, Molly and Rocky had been under pressure. It was really good to feel free at last. When they'd got their laughter out of their systems, Molly went to the kitchen and fixed herself a ketchup sandwich and half a glass of concentrated grenadine. Rocky made himself a potato chip sandwich and poured himself a cube. When they came back, Sinclair was questioning Cornelius and relaxing on the sofa. They listened to the truth as it tumbled from Cornelius's lipstick-stained mouth. Cornelius Logan had gotten into the lap pool from the road that ran under Sinclair's aqueduct. He stopped the world in order to position a truck so that it was the perfect platform from which to climb up. That small question dealt with, Sinclair demanded answers to much bigger questions. Although the real Lucy Logan had lived in Briarsville Cottage, from where, in her hypnotized state, she'd done research work for Cornelius, he lived in Briarsville Park, an enormous, stately home outside the town. From there, he'd masterminded his operations. He'd spent years laying the foundations of his power, so that, in many other countries, he'd already controlled the heads of police, the heads of armies, the editors of newspapers, and the owners of TV stations. But the hub of his ingenious strategy was in America. Cornelius planned that Primo Cell, his hypnotized president, would marry the quiet, unassuming librarian, the hypnotized Lucy Logan. As soon as she had moved into the White House as First Lady, then he, Cornelius, would move in too. From that moment on, Cornelius would have traveled the world with his twin sister and her husband, President Cell. We would have been an invincible threesome. I would have been supremely powerful. Other countries would have bound themselves to America, and one day it would have been renamed Logania. They heard how Cornelius had been insanely jealous of his twin. Indeed, when, all those years ago, Lucy Logan had been expecting a baby, Cornelius had been so jealous of her happiness that he'd hypnotized her future husband, the young American Primo Cell, and after Lucy had given birth to the baby, he'd taken advantage of her exhausted mind and hypnotized her too. He'd got rid of the baby girl, putting her in an old marshmallow box and leaving her on the doorstep of Hardwick House Orphanage. And that was how it all started. When he'd finished his story, Cornelius's eyes were fluttering, exhausted, and his head kept lolling on his shoulders. I was never any good with people, bah. Molly was sick of hearing his voice. She'd loathed this cruel person who'd shaped her whole life. Well, from now on, you will forget your past, she said suddenly, and you will be happy to do that. And now you will have a long sleep. When you wake up, I don't want to hear another word out of your horrible life, about your horrible life, unless I ask it of you. Cornelius Logan nodded, and curling up on the floor by the fire, he slumped into a deep sleep. Molly pulled a blanket over herself and stared at the flames, her thoughts broken only by Cornelius's incoherent mutterings. Bah, he brayed. No, he begged. Please don't eat me, he bleated. When Molly woke up, the light outside was dusky. She had slept so heavily that one side of her face was hot and red. As she opened her eyes, she saw Cornelius Logan still in a pile on the floor. Rocky and Primo were sitting at the coffee table, drinking something from mugs, and behind them Los Angeles glittered, electric. Primo looked weary. He was telling Rocky about things that he had done under Cornelius's spell. Molly wrapped her blanket around her and shuffled over to sit down beside them. For a moment, she wondered whether Rocky had told Primo that Molly was his daughter. Then, knowing that, of course, Rocky wouldn't have done this, she relaxed. Hi, you're up, said Primo, smiling. He pointed at Cornelius. I expect he's got jet lag. Hypno-lag, suggested Molly. He was a bit of a hypno-hag, wasn't he? Said Rocky, and everyone laughed. And what a hag, said Primo more seriously. It's going to take me a long time to come to terms with the fact that I have lived like a radio-controlled robot for 11 years. I would have lived my life a lot differently if I hadn't been on Cornelius Logan's string. Molly and Rocky didn't know what to say to make him feel better. They both knew how cheated they had felt when to have someone take away their time and choose how they should spend it. Primo, they supposed, would have enjoyed himself some of the time, but unlike them, he had been forced to behave really badly. Try and think of the nice things that have happened to you, suggested Molly. I mean, you've made lots of friends. Now you can really make friends with them. They were hypnotized to like me, Molly. When I release them, they won't see me as successful and amusing and brilliant anymore. Some of them might. Maybe. And look, you've got lots of good businesses that you still own, and you can still run them. You still have your TV stations. You can still do lots of stuff that Cornelius Logan never allowed you to do. That's true. And you're very, very rich, said Rocky. At least you've got tons of money. You can't buy time, said Primo morosely. I've had 11 years ripped from me. And worse than that, you can't buy love. Nobody loves me. Nobody. I haven't even got a dog or a goldfish that loves me. Molly felt very sorry for Primo, because what he said was true. She didn't know how to cheer him up. She certainly wasn't going to tell him that she was his long-lost daughter. She didn't want a big, soppy scene. Listen, Primo, she tried. I feel sorry for you, and you know what? I don't think I could feel sorry for you if I didn't love you a bit. Same here, said Rocky. Love has to start somewhere, and as you can see, it started in both of us, for you, if you see what I mean. So you're not alone. You've got us. Petula made a little comforting woof noise, as if she loved Primo just a bit too. Thanks, you three, said Primo, but I don't deserve it. His face darkened, and he shuddered involuntarily. I'm sorry, I keep remembering things that have happened, and suddenly they fill me up with horrible feelings, and... Oh, Primo shut his eyes in pain. It's because you weren't allowed to feel anything for years, said Molly. Cornelius barred you from feeling anything, so now the feelings are all tumbling out of the cages they've been kept in. Primo sighed sorrowfully. They sure are, he said. I can't believe what I've done. Molly looked at her father. For the next few years, she realized, he was going to be a basket case. There was no way that she, Rocky, and Sinclair could handle them on their own. Then she remembered Forrest. Molly found Forrest downstairs eating alfalfa sprouts and unwrapping some healing crystals that he'd bought. Hey, Molly, he said. Glad you're here. You can help hang up this body map. Look, if you have a headache, you can get rid of it by pressing the ball of your big toe. It turned out that Forrest knew all about Primo Cell and hypnotism. In fact, it was he who had encouraged Sinclair to break away from his father. When Forrest learned how Cornelius had stolen years of Cell's life away, he rolled his eyes and chuckled. Whoa! Some people are crazy as headless chickens. And when Molly asked him to help Primo recover, he replied, Molly, that would be my cosmic pleasure. Of course, it won't all be nice, said Molly. He's done lots of bad things. He even tried to kill us. Killing people's not good, said Forrest. But don't forget, Cell was not in control of himself when he did that. I can handle it, Molly. Don't you worry. Remember, I've lived with cannibals. Molly gave Forrest a hug. And will you help sort out Davina Natel, too? Work out how we can put her back without her knowing where she's been and all that? If you'd like me to, said Forrest. And Forrest, she asked, would you do me one last favor? Please don't tell Primo that I'm his daughter. I just don't want all that heavy stuff right now. I'm kind of happy the way I am. You bet you are, said Forrest, passing her a piece of ginger tofu turnip. You, Molly, are one cool kid. Thanks, Forrest, said Molly, taking a lump of the gunky vegetable. That looks interesting. I'll take it upstairs and eat it there. We're almost done. Molly and Rocky were dying to be reunited with all their friends from the orphanage as soon as possible, and the following day the perfect opportunity offered itself. Thunder Roll, the film that Petula had co-starred in, directed by Gino Pucci and starring Gloria Heelhart, was having its premiere that night. The evening promised to be full of stars, glamour, and excitement. Primo hadn't yet dehypnotized any of his celebrities, and at Molly's request, he had invited most of them to come. Molly knew that everyone from Happiness House would love this, especially Miss Trinkleberry and Hazel. She wanted to give them a night they would always remember. So the next day, as Primo Cell tackled the serious task of informing Congress and the world that he didn't want to be president, Molly handled the more pleasurable job of taking Petula to Bella's Poodle Salon. Then she made sure that she and Rocky had some nice clothes to wear. At 6 that evening, Cell parked his favorite Rolls-Royce next to Sinclair's Aston Martin underneath the Hill House. Rocky, Molly, Petula, Sinclair, and Forrest came down the elevator all spruced up and ready to hit the town. Forrest was in his usual socks and flip-flops, but because it was a special occasion, he was wearing his brown cheesecloth suit and his favorite t-shirt, which said, "Recycle, dudes." Unfortunately, Cornelius had to come with them, and no one was entirely happy about leaving him behind. Dressed in a gray tracksuit and with a stubby beard, he looked reasonably normal, although as they drove along, he stuck his head out of the window and bleated with excitement. Everyone ignored him. They drove to Hollywood Boulevard, where they all climbed out and headed toward the movie theater. As they neared the crowded, spotlit entrance, Molly's heart fluttered. She couldn't wait to see her old orphanage family. And suddenly, there they were, standing on the sidewalk, all dressed up and obviously just excited as Molly and Rocky. "Oh, they're here!" shrieked Miss Trinkleberry, launching herself toward them like a violet chiffon rocket. "I can't believe how much I've missed you both," she said, practically knocking their heads together and suffocating them with her embrace. Molly and Rocky breathed in Miss Trinkleberry's familiar smell. It was a country cottage smell of cakes and rosewater, of vanilla and lavender honey and butter. The smell that reminded them of her nursery rhymes and games of hide-and-seek. "Oh, Miss T," said Molly, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, it's just lovely to see you again." "Same here, Chick," said Miss Trinkleberry, giving her a squeeze that made her know she'd come home at last. "And congratulations, on being engaged and all that." "Thank you, sweetheart. We won't be married for a little while, but look at my ring." Miss Trinkleberry showed Molly a bright yellow buttercup that girdled her fat finger. "It's lovely." Molly felt a tug at her dress. Ruby and Jinx were staring up at her. "I can read now, Molly," Ruby said, "and I can write. Look." She ripped open an envelope that said, "Welcome back." And inside was a card with a picture of Petula painted on it. "It's for you two," she said, thrusting it into Molly's hands. Then everyone wanted to say hello. What Molly found amazing was how all the children had changed. Everyone was taller, especially Gemma and Gary. Gordon, Cynthia, and Hazel had slimmed down a lot. Craig was muscly. Hazel was the most difficult to recognize, as she dyed her hair platinum blonde, and everyone looked healthy, as though they had a lovely summer in the sun. "Hi guys," Hazel said, kissing them. "What's happened to your accent? You sound American," Molly observed. "I'm practicing for a walk-on part I got in a film," said Hazel. "I've got loads to tell you." "Hello, you two. Nice to see you," said Knockman, smiling from behind Hazel. He was wearing a green velvet suit and a Hawaiian shirt with a red parrot on it. Molly was amazed. His German accent had worn off, so now he spoke in his original Chicago accent. The only person missing from the Happiness House crowd was Roger. Molly saw him 30 feet away, talking to a palm tree. He seemed completely oblivious of Cornelius, who was bleeding madly and cantering around and around him, shouting, "Ba, ba mine, ba mine, ba mine." Sinclair went over to quiet him down. Cameras flashed as everyone stepped onto the short red carpet in front of the theater. Already the stars were arriving. Hercules Stone kissed Miss Trinkleberry's hand and escorted her past the barriers lined with cheering fans. Miss Trinkleberry batted her eyelashes and waved at them as if she was the queen. Cosmo Ace introduced himself to Hazel. King Moose went in with Cynthia, and Stephanie Goulash took a blushing Mr. Knockman and Gordon by the hand. Dusty Goldman led in Jinx and Ruby. Sinclair dealt with Cornelius. Rocky found himself making friends with Billy Bob Bimble, and Molly was very happy to accompany Gemma, Gary, and Primo Cell in. Petula and Gloria Heelheart behaved like the true professionals they were. Petula barked at the applauding crowds, twirled on her hind legs for the photographers, and let Gloria smother her with perfumed caresses. Everyone loved her. The film was Gino Pucci's best work to date, and without a doubt, the most entertaining bits in it were Petula's. Everyone clapped and cheered, especially when she had to parachute with Gloria from a burning airplane. After the premiere, they all went out with the hypnotized stars for a celebratory supper. Los Angeles is a great city for restaurants. There's Japanese, Chinese, Thai, Spanish, English, Mexican, Indian, Moroccan, Persian, and of course, always American. But the restaurant that Primo Cell picked for the party was French. It was called the Orangerie and had a very famous chef. This was the home of lobster bisque and snails and garlic, of accompanied sauces and dishes that took hours to prepare, of frites, not French fries, and of towering soufflés and oozing desserts. It was a lovely evening. The ordering was chaotic as no one understood the French menu, but everything was delicious, and all the guests got fuller and fuller and fuller. Molly and Rocky were eager to hear what the others had been doing. "Craig can surf really well," said Jinx, stuffing frites into his mouth. But he said to start with, it was like being a fly flushed down the toilet. "Soon I'm going to learn too," Except I don't know if we'll be here. Jinx turned to Miss Trinkleberry. Are we going to stay in California for a long time? The chatter around the table subsided as the ears of the orphanage children responded like radar scanners to Jinx's shrill question. The room went quiet. Well, Chuck, Miss Trinkleberry stammered, halfway through a mouthful of salad. I really don't know. I mean, what do you all think? Molly and Rocky are back now. Maybe the time has come for us to go home. You know we can't expect Mr. Sinclair to pay our rent forever, and Simon will be able to make a living if he finishes his locksmith exams back in Briarsville. Primo Cell interrupted. You can all come and live at my place, he said. Miss Trinkleberry coughed as a piece of lettuce went down the wrong way. Mr. Knockman patted her on the back. Of course, you and Mr. Knockman are invited too, said Primo, unless you'd prefer to be somewhere else, but I think the children would miss you if you lived further away than the gatehouse. Well, that's a lovely idea, said Miss Trinkleberry. Isn't it, Simon dear? The only problem is that we have a lot of animals and birds, Knockman said. Yeah, I've got 33 mice now, said Jerry. Actually, I think Scrunchball might be having her babies right this minute. My house is huge. We could start a zoo there, said Primo. And so it was decided that a vote should be taken. Everyone wanted to come stay at Primo's, and the matter seemed final until Molly remembered Roger, who was sitting under an orange tree in the restaurant's hallway. Roger was eating a bowl of pecan nuts. How are you, Roger? Molly asked quietly. Roger looked shifty and threw a blue paper dart at her. Molly opened it up. Inside, the scrawled writing said, Sorry about this, but I know too much. Know too much about what, Roger? Roger looked up at her sadly. Too much about the she-he, he said mournfully. Memories of the words and other paper messages that Roger had written filled Molly's head. Send help quick, aliens have eaten my brain. Watch out, the brain centipedes are here. Don't judge your body by its skin. Molly thought of the topiary here in Cornelius's collection of clipped bushes. Was it a mad March hare? Did it represent Roger? In a moment of pure instinct, Molly stopped the world. She took Roger's hand and sent a shaft of coldness into it so that he could move, and looked deeply into his confused eyes. From now on, she said, you, Roger, will no longer be under anyone else's power. You will be yourself. Then she added the old useful password, perfectly punctually. And with that, Roger blinked, and the glazed look in his eyes fell away. Molly let the world move. Roger stared around him and seized Molly's hand as if he was finding it difficult to balance. He looked completely disoriented, as though everything in the room was upside down. Then he put his hand on his chest as if checking if he was alive. In a moment, he'd absorbed what happened. Oh, thank you, Molly. Molly, you've saved me, he cried. He threw his arms around Molly's neck and hugged her tightly. He smelled of leaves and bark and grass. I've been trapped inside myself. It's been horrible, he sobbed. All the time I was trying to tell everyone, but I couldn't communicate. Cornelius did it, and he made me have hallucinations. He hypnotized me to think that voices were haunting me. It's been so frightening. I can't tell you how frightening. Don't worry, Roger. It's going to be all right now, said Molly, hugging him back. Thank you, Molly, Roger sobbed. You freed me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. For a moment, Roger clung to Molly. Then he let go and put his head in his hands. So you found out too much about Cornelius Logan? Guessed Molly. How? You remember how I liked to go through garbage cans, said Roger. Well, I went through the cans at the library, Lucy Logan's cans, and I found instructions that Cornelius Logan had written. I saw Lucy Logan arguing with him. They looked so alike. It was weird. I saw him push her into a car. She was driven away. Cornelius saw me. I knew too much. He hypnotized me. I've been crazy for months. Well, not anymore, Roger, said Molly. Molly thought of Forrest. He was going to have 2 basket cases on his hands this winter. Roger, like Primo, would need to stay here with Forrest until he had recovered. And the decision that everyone must stay in LA became clear. Except for Molly. Molly had to leave, for Molly knew that soon Primo Stella would learn she was his daughter, and she wasn't ready for that yet. She wanted to live with the idea of having a father before she introduced herself to him properly. Besides, she had something much more important to do. Much later that night, as everyone else arrived at Primo Cell's gray stone mansion, thrilled that this was to be their new home, Molly, Petula, and Rocky stood on the tarmac of Los Angeles Airport. A private jet, a black and white golden symbol painted on its tail fin, awaited its single passenger. "I'll miss you," said Molly. "I'll miss you," said Rocky. "Are you sure you don't want me to come?" "No, Rocky. This is something I need to figure out. It won't be any fun for you. You need a vacation. And Billy Bob Bimble seems to be very interested in doing some music with you. You gotta go for it. I'll be back soon." "As long as you think you'll be all right, Molly. But if you need me for anything, at any time, even in the middle of the night, call me." "I will." The two friends hugged, and then Molly gave a whistle. "Come on, Petula." Rocky watched his best friend climb the plane's steps. The engine started, Molly waved once more, and then she was gone. Flying home in Primo Cell's luxurious private jet was fabulous. Its main cabin was laid out like a sitting room, with cream-colored carpets, small tables, and green leather armchairs. The flight attendant was very welcoming, and soon Molly was belted up with grenadine in her hands and Petula beside her. The engines roared, and Los Angeles, lit up with 1,000,000,000 bulbs and 1,000,000 wannabe stars, slipped away beneath them. Molly spent most of the 11-hour flight asleep in a comfortable full-size bed. She touched down feeling wide awake. At the airport, a car was waiting for her, and soon she was sitting in the back of a spacious Mercedes, rolling down country roads. It was a 50-minute journey to Cornelius Logan's house. Cornelius hadn't lived all these years in a humble cottage like his sister. He had access to as much money as he'd wanted, money made by Primo Cell. So, fond of luxury and excess, Cornelius had bought himself an astonishingly grand house in the country. Briarsville Park had been a 4-mile-long drive. Once Molly had hypnotized the gatekeeper, the car purred smoothly along it. She and Petula stared out of the window at the herd of llamas grazing under old oak trees. Then the llama paddocks came to an end, and now the parkland was full of dark green bushes. They were all topiary hedges, and each one was of a different creature. A horse hedge, an elephant bush, a cat, a mouse, a monkey. Here and there Molly saw people in yellow suits on ladders with shears in their hands, clipping the leafy sculptures. Molly felt sure that every one of the bush animals stood for a person Cornelius Logan had hypnotized. Eventually, the car turned a wide bend, and before them was the house. White, stately, and splendid, it had 4 tall columns supporting its palatial porch, and leading down to a circular gravel drive. Topiary animals stood on the lawns in front of it, looking as if they wanted to walk in. A giant magpie bush, shaped to look as if it was flying, grew in the center of the circle of gravel. Molly picked up Petula and stopped the world. She climbed out of the car and up the broad steps. She walked straight past the frozen butler at the front of the door and into the hall. Animal heads of bison, tigers, leopards, antelope, and deer stared down from the walls. Petula growled at them. A display of antique shears reminded Molly of exactly where they were. She looked at a map that Cornelius had drawn her and went up the main stairs. Here the walls were covered with clocks. At the top stood a maid, still as a statue. Molly started to run. She ran down a corridor lined with tables. On each one sat a tiny bonsai tree in a pot. She picked her way up another flight of stairs. Now they were at the top of the house. These rooms were the servants' quarters. Molly squeezed Petula for comfort and started down the long passage. For a moment, at the end there was a motionless guard sitting by a red door. For a moment, Molly caught her breath. Then, slowly, she lifted the latch. Inside, Lucy Logan stood motionless, still as the window that she was staring out of. She was dressed in a white dressing gown, and she looked thin and tired. But she was, at last, the real Lucy Logan, the Lucy with the sky-blue eyes. Molly stepped towards her. As she did, her eyes fell on a piece of paper on the windowsill. On the paper were handwritten words, a verse. Molly couldn't help reading them. They went, "Sitting on an island in the ocean may seem kind of free. Lying on a beach of golden sand may sound as life should be. Sound like heaven, but it ain't a heaven, no siree. 1,000,000,000 waves of sea, you see, divide you from me. Only you can make my world heavenly." They sounded like the words of an old-fashioned song. Molly paused, suddenly aware that an uncertain future was before her. She wondered how old-fashioned Lucy would be. She hoped they would like each other. In fact, now that she was about to wake her mother, Molly wasn't really sure if she wanted one. It was one thing knowing who her mother was, and quite another actually having one. Would Molly suddenly find herself being told to do things? She didn't like this idea at all. She was used to being her own boss. For a few seconds, Molly's eyes lingered on the song as she pondered her predicament. Well, she thought, she would have to make her feelings very, very clear to Lucy Logan as soon as she could. That was all. Molly was just about ready now. Then another fear reared its head. If Molly was now Lucy Logan and Primo Cell's daughter, would she have to change her name? The thought that she might have to become Molly Cell or Molly Logan was extremely unsavory. Molly could already feel herself digging in her heels to refuse. But worse than that was the notion that Molly might be made to be someone else in other ways. She didn't want to become a person her new parents might like her to be. She wanted to always be herself, Molly Moon. Molly sat down on a chair. She looked at her mother's slippered feet and then at the sneakers on her own. In an instant, she realized that it made no difference who her parents were. They were themselves, and she was herself, if she chose to be. What had she been thinking? That she might be brainwashed by her new parents? Of course she wouldn't be. Her mind was a free place, wasn't it? It was then, in the silence of the turret room, that Molly made a secret oath. She promised that whatever happened, she would always make up her own mind about things. However the dice fell, she would always be true to her Molly Moon self. Her changing self. Molly looked out the window at an autumn leaf that hung in the air, and she considered how much she'd changed since she'd last seen Lucy Logan. Nearly a year had passed, and in that time she'd almost been blown away. There had been brilliant moments, but some dreadful ones too. As Molly held the world still, she felt scared by the future, worried by its uncertainty. She was nervous of letting it come. Who knew what other nasty surprises her life held in store for her? But life was always unpredictable, she realized. That's what made it exciting. No one ever knew what was around the corner. Of course there might be bad situations, but life was so full of interesting things, and beauty, and clever people, and lovely animals, and funny friends, that there was really nothing to fear. Life was there to be lived, not to be held captive like a genie in a bottle. Outside the window, the sky was irresistibly blue. Molly felt her spirit inside like a fiery bird, longing to fly. She was ready for both sunlight and rainstorms. So, seizing the moment, Molly popped the cork and bravely unleashed time. In the Hollywood Hills, a girl sat cross-legged on the ground in a scruffy chicken yard. She was wearing purple pajamas and dark sunglasses. Beside her hand, a chicken pecked at the ground for grain, and in front of her sat a tall, old hippie. His eyes were big and swirling behind his bottle-glass spectacles. His hair was long and gray. More tofu turnip, Davina? Yes, please. And Forrest, can we eat it standing on our heads again? Sure thing. That would be my cosmic pleasure. The end. We finished! I told you it would be wild toward the end. And was it not very wild? Plot twist upon plot twist upon plot twist. Crazy. What do you guys think? Yeah? I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. It was cute. We found her parents. So I have water. Not immediately, but as soon as I end stream, I'll refill my water. Let me see what the extras are. Ooh, hypnotic tips from Molly Moon. Well, we gotta do that. Ooh, hang on. This is interesting. There's an interview with the with the author, Georgia Bing? Bing. Have you ever been hypnotized yourself? Before I wrote Molly Moon Stops the World, I was exhausted. I had only just finished writing Molly Moon's incredible book of hypnotism, and I had a new baby to look after too. But I'd promised my publisher a second book. I started to worry that I wouldn't be able to think of an idea for it, so worried that I eventually decided I would go to a hypnotist. Please help me stop worrying, I said to the hypnotist, after I'd sat down in her comfortable blue chair. I can't stop you worrying, she said, but I can put you in touch with the creative side of yourself. That sounded all right, I thought, and so I let her hypnotize me. It was lovely, like a mind massage. Even thinking of it now makes me feel all relaxed. Yawn, yawn. After she'd taken me deep into my mind, I felt wonderful. I felt so full of ideas that I could hardly wait to get home to start writing. Isn't that funny? So if you ever feel you can't do something, relax. You can. A note from Petula with interesting doggy spellings. A few hypnotic tips from Molly Moon. This should be interesting. Hello everybody out there, this is me, Molly Moon. I decided to drop you a quick note because everyone else seems to be doing it, and also I'd like to make contact. First of all, I hope you like the author who I choose to write my memoirs. I almost didn't get around to recording my life, but it has turned out so extraordinary that I eventually realized I should write it down for posterity and for you to read. I jumped into Georgia Bing in Briarsville, where there was a literary festival. You know the sort of thing, where writers come to talk to people about their books and how they write. Well, I got into a conversation with Georgia about my life, and she thought it would work best told as a novel instead of a memoir. She said it would sound more suspenseful that way. I thought this sounded brilliant. I also hope that a few books about my life might bring some other time-stopping hypnotists out into the daylight, although the likelihood of this is slim, as time-stopping hypnotists are sadly almost extinct. However, out of the hundreds of thousands of children all over the world who read these books, which have been published in America, Australia, South Africa, Brazil, Britain, France, Italy, Germany, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, Norway, Finland, Latvia, Sweden, a lot. There may be a few plain hypnotists. Me. That happened to me. Crazy. So here, off the top of my head, are a few hypnotic tips. Alright. Always be aware of where you hypnotize people. I could write a long list of where you should be careful of hypnotizing people, but I'll write a short one and you should get the idea. Be careful of hypnotizing underwater. The refraction of the water can do funny things to your hypnotic eye glare, and people can think they're hypnotized by the water and not by you. When they think they're hypnotized by the water, it's really tricky as they do all sorts of weird things. They want to sleep in the water, for instance, and they want to keep drinking it. They go into water nymph mode, and it can be really embarrassing for them. Be careful hypnotizing people near water, too. I hypnotized a big woman in the swimming pool in Los Angeles because she was saying how much she needed to do some exercise, but couldn't be bothered. I thought I'd do her a favor and make exercise really easy for her. But when I hypnotized her, she fell over backwards and her head went under. It was terrible. She nearly drowned. Jesus Christ. Rocky had to help pull her out, and we had to put her into the life-saving position. Boy, was she heavy. Her makeup had smudged all over her face, and she coughed up a bucket of water. At least she survived. But phew, that gave me a shock. Similarly, if you hypnotize people through the flames of a fire, the eye glare gets distorted, and this can be really dangerous. People hypnotized by fire want to get into the fire, so they get barbecued. I luckily have never had this happen to anyone. Yes, you must be really careful of where people are when you hypnotize them. I would never hypnotize someone who was standing on the edge of a cliff or by a busy road. You never know if they're going to react strangely and move when you first hypnotize them. Step backwards off the cliff or into the traffic, that sort of thing. You do not want fatalities. Number 2. Be careful of who you are hypnotizing. Be careful of hypnotizing drivers when they're driving, and pilots of planes or helicopters and captains of ships, etc. Be careful of hypnotizing people holding dangerous things, i.e. butchers holding knives, guards holding fierce dogs, police holding guns, old ladies holding umbrellas or heavy handbags. Of course, sometimes you will just have to hypnotize on the spot, but just be aware that if you do it wrong, the weapon they are holding can be used against you. 3. hypnotizing animals, as we've had many discussions about on streams for some reason, which is not a thing. Hypnotizing animals. Obviously, this is great fun, but just be careful as animals with teeth can be very scary if they aren't hypnotized properly. It is lovely, though, to hypnotize panthers and make them cuddly. You can hypnotize elephants to do dog tricks and mice to run in circles or climb into matchboxes. When you hypnotize animals, you just have to work out a way of explaining what you want them to do, and this really comes down to your imagination. Number 4. Remember that you probably don't want a lot of attention if you are hypnotizing people, so don't ask them to scream at the top of their voices or do something that will get them arrested. To be a responsible hypnotist, you should always make sure that you are around to bring a person out of the trance you put them in. Solid. If they are miles away in a police station cell, you can't get to them, unless you hypnotize the police too. Generally though, you don't want to make people do things that make them get in trouble, as this is not very nice. Unless, of course, they deserve a bit of punishment like Adderstone did. I have found that hypnotism is best when it's used to help people. It's brilliant for curing bad habits like smoking, overeating, fear of flying, fear of making friends, that sort of thing. And as a hypnotist, it always feels so nice to be useful like this. And don't forget that you can also hypnotize yourself. I like the hypnotic saying that goes, "Every day, in every way, I get better and better and better." It's amazing, if you say this to yourself, your life really does start to get better. It's called positive affirmation, and it is a fantastic hypnotic tip to help yourself. The other thing that is nice to say to yourself is, ban bad thoughts from your head and only think of the good things. It's really good to do this, as nasty thoughts, like worries and things you don't like, can spoil your day. So I often hypnotize myself to focus on the good things. So, happy hypnotizing. Love from Molly. P.S. By the way, that letter from Petula was not from Petula at all. Rocky wrote it because he's the creative type, and he thought that Petula would like a word with you all if she could. P.P.S. Rocky says hi. What's the next one? Book 3 is Molly Moon's incredible time travel adventure. I won't read the little excerpt from that, but now we're gonna get into time travel. So clearly, as we all know, hypnosis leads to be able to stop time, freeze everything, and later, time travel. Isn't that wacky? Hello. Hi. And thank you for resubscribing with Prime. You came just at the end of the stream, though. Why are you foggy? It'll be fine. Wait. Hello? Why are you dead? You're not supposed to be dead. There we go. Time does fly by when you're under. It sure does. Obedience is pleasure. Good. Yeah, I'm glad. But yeah, I'm glad we were able to finish the book today. My throat kind of hurts, so I'm gonna spend the rest of the day probably not talking much. Let me know what you guys thought of the book, whether it's in comments or on Discord, because these books were very influential to me as a child, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about it and all the crazy things that end up happening. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Happy New Year, and to a whole new year of more streams and hanging out and having fun. All right. Bye, guys. Bye. Secret time. Man, can you imagine if I had a crystal that could stop time? That would be so fucking cool. Like, crystals with power in general is always